Release that witch eye by Ermu. Chapter 401, Winter in the Fjords. In the sea of the fjords lies Sleeping Island. The skyline turned a pale yellow as the last of the high-rise buildings was finally completed. Although the setting sun was not visible, one could still see a streak of golden light reflected on the sea's surface by the sunset glow that passed through the clouds. Only the harsh cold gusts of wind, which blew directly at one's face, gave away the fact that it was no longer autumn. And it's done. Lotus lifted up the scarf around her neck until her ears were also covered by the soft cotton. This will be our new home once the furniture and beds are moved in. Fantastic. Durat Kimshu clapped and said. That's a lot of houses built in half a month. And I thought Lady Tilly was exaggerating. Lady Tilly doesn't lie, Breeze added. Indeed, Durat stroked his thick double chin and said. If that's the case, I'm reassured about resettling my citizens over here. Oh, what's this? The merchant who came from the Crescent Moon Bay analyzed the groove-shaped parapet that was in the house. Bending his body, he even stuck his head in the hole to take a look inside. This is a warming device that I learned about in the western region. It's called a heated brick bed. Lotus explained. It's connected to the kitchen, and hence when a fire is started in the kitchen, this bed will also turn warm. Add a wooden plank on top and cover it with linen or straw, and you can use it as a bench or a bed. It'll be more comfortable than your typical furniture, especially in the current season. Interesting design, Durat said and glanced squarely at Lotus. If I wanted to hire you for the long term, how many gold royals would it cost? What, do you mean? Lotus was slightly astonished. Follow me to work in the Crescent Moon Bay. There remain several wastelands which have yet to be developed in my territory. Your abilities will prove extremely useful. Durat rubbed his hands and said. How many gold royals do I have to pay the sleeping spell in order for Lady Tilly to authorize you to follow me? Sorry, I've never thought of leaving. Your life over there will be much better than it is here, Durat interrupted quickly. You'll get to live in the same large compound as me, enjoy fine wine and cuisine from the Four Kingdoms every day, and have attendants accompanying you wherever you go. That's the ideal life that many people envision, and I'm giving it to you as long as you work for me. Besides, Lady Tilly has said that the requests of the sleeping spell must be fulfilled, and I'm able to afford your recruitment fees no matter how high it is. Lotus frowned. She was not unfamiliar with his kind of attitude. Although verbally, he said that he was hiring her, it felt to her more as though she was being bought. Just as she was about to bawl out a few sentences, Breeze gently tugged on her hand. Even though the requests must be fulfilled, it doesn't mean that it'll be accepted. There are some things that even witches can't do. Besides, all parties have to approve before an agreement can be made. You mean that money alone isn't enough? I've never seen a deal like this, Durat spoke with displeasure. Was what you said when you cast the Sleeping Island mere rhetoric to make fun of us? No one will believe or be interested in you if this goes on. I doubt so, someone responded from behind. There's only one witches' guild that offers rewards, whether it be in the fjords or the Four Kingdoms. If you don't come, there will be others. Who speaks? The merchant turned his head and received a rude shock. Why? Your Highness Thunder. I came up with some of the ideas for the regulations of the sleeping spell. Before a contract is signed, the consent of the employee has to take into consideration the possible risks associated with the tasks. They'll not be forced to venture into grave danger, Thunder said in a clear voice and laughed. Do you have an issue with this? No, this is definitely reasonable. Durat's facial expression restored to normal. Then, I'll still have to trouble you in the future, Miss Lotus. Phew. Lotus watched the merchant and his entourage make their departure, and sighed in relief. Thanks. No problem, I was just passing through. Thunder laughed. Didn't you follow Lady Tilly to the western region? Yes, but I came back early together with Honey and Breeze, because Sleeping Island needed to prepare supplies and houses for winter. She gave him a simple account of the matter. Have you completed your expedition? Ha ha ha, yes, It was an incredible and unimaginable trip. Thunder's eyes lit up as soon as she mentioned his expedition. This was the first time I saw different sea levels occurring at the same time. Our ship seemed as though it was flying. We didn't fall into the sea when we advanced past the cliffs that were formed by the waves. If I hadn't seen it myself, I absolutely wouldn't believe that such a strange sight could be real. Different sea levels? Lotus murmured. How could it be? The sea water ain't rocks. Wouldn't it flow downwards? I named it the Sealine, and it's located to the northeast of the Shadow Islands. When we reached the top of a cliff, it would appear like a long line which we couldn't see the ends of, and the sea would seem to be divided into two distinct sections. He patted his chest excitedly. I can't wait to venture even further next time. It was indeed worthy of the most prominent explorer in the fjords that the first thing he talked about upon his return was regarding his adventures, and not regarding his daughter who was far away in the western region. Lotus shook her head helplessly as she watched him talk on and on. Before darkness fell and the temperature outdoors plunged, Lotus had already climbed early into the heated brick bed. This was the most relaxing moment of her day. For more than a month, she not only constructed a new batch of houses but also renovated the creaking houses of other witches. Crowding onto the heated brick bed with everyone else and chatting about her experiences in Border Town, the questions from her companions, which were born out of a mix of curiosity and envy, ensured that she did not get any sleep for half of the night. The conversation topic shifted to the birdbeak mushrooms. Her companion started to salivate when she mentioned how she prepared them. She would place the mushrooms in some butter and flip them a few times, then fry until both sides of the mushrooms were golden brown in color, and finally sprinkle a bit of salt on top to create a most delicious dish. I feel like eating this, Shadow exclaimed. After eating dried fish on board for a month, my mouth is full of a salty and fishy smell. Great, Molly could not help interrupting Lotus. If only I was the one whom Lady Tilly's elder brother invited. Hey, there are even more amazing things you haven't heard. Someone giggled. In the showers of Border Town, the water comes straight out of the wall, and the scented soap makes your whole body smell great after showering. There's really something like this? Shadow asked curiously. Of course, and I even brought one back. Lotus curled her lips upwards. But it has been used up. Don't talk about it. At least they got to experience it. I followed Lady Tilly to the western region and then immediately brought these girls back here. I didn't get to enjoy anything. Breeze bemoaned. As she listened to the witches' gabbling discussions, Lotus suddenly had a thought. If it was instead His Highness Roland Wimbledon who wanted to hire her long-term, would she have agreed? After contemplating for a while, she realized that she would not be able to refuse if it was indeed Roland. What an embarrassment. Lotus tucked herself inside her quilt and glanced left and right. Luckily, the lamp was already extinguished, or else someone might have realized what she was thinking about. However, when would Lady Tilly finally be able to accept His Highness Roland? It would be great if they could stay together forever. Lotus held the cloth tightly in her arms. If so, it would be good for me and the other witches, as we would all be able to live happily in Border Town. Chapter 402, Organizational Structure. At the beginning of the second month of winter, Berev walked into Roland's office, carrying a stack of books under his arms. As he walked up to Roland's table, a huge color painting on the table caught his attention. Is this a map of the entire western region? Not just the western region, Roland said, laughing. It also includes a portion of the barbarian land and the misty forest, especially this space over here. He pointed to an area in the northern part of the impassable mountain range. It was the fertile plains that Agatha had talked about. At present, the area that we've already discovered is equivalent to 3 western regions. If we manage to cultivate the land of this large space, we can resettle hundreds of thousands of people. In order to eliminate the threat that came from Devil's Town, he had sent Lightning and Maggie to comb through the area and draw up a map. Now that Maggie could carry Soraya while she did the drawing, more accurate maps could be drawn. Although the disappearance of the Devil's Camp was still a mystery, The good news was that there was no sign of another enemy camp within 200 kilometers of border town. In the barbarian land, there aren't only demonic beasts, but also scary enemies, like you said. Barov's words came with a hint of hesitation. Won't it be too dangerous to cultivate the land towards the northwest? By that time, the First Army will most likely be equipped with the power to fight demons. Roland slowly swiveled his finger around the plains on the map. It won't be safe anywhere if we're unable to defeat these enemies. Ever since demon scouts were spotted in the misty forest, he knew that he could not conceal this information for long. In order to prevent the panic that could be brought about by a sudden revelation, he first disclosed the existence of demons to his top brass. Judging from the current situation, the reaction of the people were fairly normal. Of course, he had slightly downplayed the strength of the demons by asserting that they were of the same ilk as demonic hybrid beasts, while he did not divulge the history of the two battles of divine will. Roland knew that his kingdom could not remain on the mainland border forever if it wanted to be on par with the Four Kingdoms. Only the barbarian land, or should we say, the fertile plains, was a land area that was worthy of his governance. In fact, the area that had been explored was only a tiny fraction of the entire plains. One could imagine the vast amount of land that humans occupied during the Second Battle of Divine Will. He retracted his finger, then rolled up the map and placed it to one side. Do you have any news to report? Yes, Your Highness. Barov nodded and then spread the books that were under his arms in front of the prince. I've drawn up a plan for the city hall's expansion according to your demands. Oh? I'll have a look. In order to cope with the rapid growth of territory after the establishment of the city, Roland utilized a futuristic classification of his government's functional departments, and thus set a new framework for management organizations of his time. Overall, the upper sector of the government was divided into four main branches, namely the City Hall, the military, the Security Bureau and the Witch Union. Under the expansion plan, the new City Hall would assume the role of the Cabinet or State Department, and would be the core institution of the entire territory. In time, the personnel would increase to approximately 500 people. Its 6 departments would be finance, foreign affairs, education, agriculture, industry, and law, while new departments could be added at any time according to demand. Moreover, if or when the Kingdom of Grey Castle was reunified, all of the other cities could follow this template and set up corresponding lower sector institutions, and together they would be managed by the City Hall. In addition to its battle staff, the military also had independent production and medical departments that served as logistical safeguards. Every military division had a commander-in-chief who was responsible for specific combat matters, but the supreme authority of the military rested with Roland himself. The Security Bureau was a secret organization which hid in the dark. Its funds were not allocated by the City Hall, while its members were also not recorded in any dossier. Its primary functions were to monitor and ensure the security within the territory and handle issues of official corruption. Lastly, the Witch Union. Roland had thought hard about this organization but eventually decided that it would be a separate department, instead of sorting the witches into the other departments. This was because, for some of the witches, their abilities would increase dramatically after evolution, and then they would be able to work across multiple departments. For example, Anna and Soraya could both play important roles in industry, agriculture, military, and education. Another reason was that there would be times when a witch would not be assigned any work, and therefore, classifying them together could effectively avoid dampening their enthusiasm. This was a point that Scroll and Wendy had brought up to him. Roland hoped that in the future, the Witch Union would operate on its own, which included handling its membership, inspection, and work allocation. Are you really able to hire so many literate people? After he finished reading the City Hall director's proposal, Roland raised his head and asked. A 500-person institution was considered enormous in this era. Plus, the requirement that every employee had to be literate would almost certainly be impossible to fulfill in other territories. Although the royal city of each kingdom might have sufficient literate people, these were in large part nobles who were too proud and arrogant to be willing to serve as apprentices. Add in the fresh batch of graduates and there shouldn't be a problem, Barov replied. According to the feedback from the recruitment notices, jobs in the city hall are the most popular. It seems that being a civil servant is popular everywhere. Roland arched his lips upwards uncontrollably. In that case, go ahead and recruit people according to this scheme. The next and final task is to formulate laws. Pass me the principal article that you mentioned the last time, and I'll have my apprentices complete the rest as fast as possible, the city hall director said in high spirits. It's called basic laws, Roland said and laughed. It appeared that enthusiastic model workers were not only confined to witches. This was a good sign for a new regime. Another thing, Your Highness, Barav said. If the city hall is expanded according to the plan, the current building may not be able to accommodate so many people. You want to build a new city hall? The prince nodded in agreement. For sure. I'll arrange Karl to see to it. In the eyes of the citizens, this was the face of the Lord. While they rarely had the chance to enter the castle, they would often settle matters in the city hall. Thus, a certain degree of splendor and style was necessary. If it was austere and unembellished, the people's confidence in him might erode. After Barav took his leave, Roland called his guards to bring in Prius Dessau, the knight from the Elk family. Roland had not seen him for half a year. The knight was visibly fatter and his face fuller than usual, while his cheeks even glowed a bright red. Life had certainly been good. Recently, there's been more eggs and poultry in the convenience market. This all your credit. Roland smiled. Your way of raising chickens and ducks must be great. Hee, Prius laughed, somewhat embarrassed. Without your support from the start, I couldn't have done any of this. Farming was not a smooth journey. When Prius first started, the foul plague even appeared and caused the death of many chickens. Roland simply thought of it as a good lesson and did not give up on him. Instead, the prince continued to buy baby chicks from the stronghold and passed them to him for raising. Presently, he had become an indispensable talent of the town's community. I plan to recruit you in the city hall under the agriculture department. Do you agree? Your Highness, you don't want me to continue raising chickens and ducks? Prius was slightly surprised. Of course not. You've been doing a great job, and therefore, I hope that you can bring more people into this business. Roland said encouragingly, soon, I plan to expand the scale of farming by more than 10 times. Then, you and your family won't be able to handle it alone. After you're recruited in the city hall, you can pass on your experience to more people and teach them how to farm. Given Lily's ability to eliminate bacteria and diseases, the most thorny problems of animal husbandry ceased to exist. Apart from chickens and ducks, large livestock such as cows and lambs were also within the prince's expansion plans. This is undoubtedly a noble job that's no less honorable than knighthood. The prince paused for a moment and then continued speaking. There'll be a day when eggs and poultry will be served on the dining tables of every household in the western region. And when people see these delicious foods, they'll all remember your name. What do you think? I'm willing to serve you. Prius Dessau clenched his fists and bowed respectfully. Chapter 403, Student and Teacher. Nana yawned loudly as she got off the bed. She glanced at the whiteness outside the window. Still, she could see nothing but snow. Reluctantly, she moved out of the warm bed and put on her thick winter coat. As she trudged out of the bedroom, she saw Aunt Alda tidying up the living room. Good morning, she muttered. Ah, little princess, you're awake. Alda smiled at her. Want breakfast? It's ready. Yes. Nana sat beside the dining table and ran her eyes around the room, but she did not see her father. Where's Daddy? Lord Pine went out early in the morning, Alda replied from the kitchen. He was carrying his silver shotgun. Indeed. Nana curled her lips upwards. He's probably gone to the city wall to practice shooting again. Ever since he fended off the demonic beasts with the flintlock, he has become enamored by this loud and booming weapon. Not only does he wipe a gun barrel every day, but also he'll go to the city wall to practice whenever he has time. Furthermore, He managed to apply for a specially made flintlock from His Highness using my healing abilities as a bargaining chip. It's all His Highness' fault for saying that long shotguns are the standard equipment for hunters, Nana thought. If Mummy's still around, Daddy probably won't go out all day long like this. Breakfast's here. Alda placed 2 steaming plates on the table in front of Nana. Fried eggs and white bread. Eat while they're hot. Thank you. Breakfast's normally prepared before Daddy leaves home. Only Aunt Alda would specially place it in hot water to keep it warm. If instead Daddy took care of me, I'd be eating cold and hard eggs. Nana sighed uncontrollably. If only Aunt Alda could marry Daddy. But the young girl knew that this wish had little chance of happening. Alda was the family servant while Daddy was a noble of border town. As far as she understood, it was difficult for a commoner and a noble to get married. She devoured the delicious breakfast, wiped her mouth, and shouted. I'm going to the medical center. Okay. Alda put down the broom she was holding, and led Nana to the door. As she bent down and tied a scarf around Nana's neck, she said, Be careful on the road, Miss Pine. Yes, Aunt. White snowflakes greeted Nana as she made her way out of the house. This was her daily routine. In the morning, she would leave home for the medical center. She would treat the patients if there were any, or else, she would practice her abilities on animals. At noon, she would go to the castle to have lunch with Roland, while in the afternoon until night time, she would remain in the medical center, after which she would return home. She was the only witch who did not live in the castle. Although time in the medical center was boring, she persisted because she wanted the patients to receive treatment as quickly as possible. The smile and warmth of the townspeople also supported and pushed her on. Lady Nana, good morning. Miss Angel, going to the medical center again? Today's weather ain't good. Do take care of your body. Miss Pine, have you eaten breakfast? Why not have a bowl of hot oatmeal that I just prepared? Greetings like these continued incessantly whenever she walked in public. It was a stark contrast to a year ago. Her sisters claimed that she was currently the most popular witch in Border Town, even more popular than Anna. Nana wasn't concerned about a popularity contest, albeit she was happy with the current atmosphere. Every person whom she had treated before would greet her affectionately, and this filled her with a sense of achievement. Elder sister Anna was right, Nana thought. The only way to change people's prejudices was to face them adamantly. When she arrived at the medical center, the first army soldier who was manning the gate bowed and greeted her. Hello, Miss Anna. Good morning, are there patients today? Not at the moment, the soldier replied. But your friends have come. Friends? She was surprised. Could it be Anna? As she thought of Anna, she excitedly ran up to the second floor and pushed open the door, only to find Mystery Moon, Hummingbird, and Lily idly lying on the table. On noticing her, the 3 of them immediately got up and surrounded her. You 3. Haha, are you pleasantly surprised? We came all the way just to see you. Mystery Moon raised her arms and exclaimed. Mystery Moon suggested that instead of lazing about in the castle, it would be a good idea to come out for a walk, Hummingbird added. You 2 may be free, but I'm certainly not. I still have many insect samples to observe. Lily, who was standing at the back, lamented. Nana must be very busy as well. You think that she's like you? Is that so? Yesterday, I peeked and saw you dozing off in front of the microscope. You were obviously sick of your job. Mystery Moon shrugged her shoulders. Nothing of that sort. Nana was slightly disappointed that it wasn't Anna who turned up, but she quickly buoyed up. At present, Anna was His Highness' busiest subordinate, and naturally, could not spend as much time with her as in the past. No, I'm in fact very free, she replied, laughing. Thank you, you 3. Ahem, since you say so, I shall remain behind to accompany you. Lily turned her head. It won't be a problem to observe the samples tomorrow. What are we gonna play? Hummingbird questioned. What else? Mystery Moon took out a pack of playing cards. Of course, this. I Fight the landlord may be interesting, but it's a 3-player game. No, not fight the landlord. She shook her head uncannily. A new game that's suitable for 4 players, where we compete to see who can show her cards the fastest. I learned it from Andrea's group only yesterday. The 3-player group of the Sleeping Island? Lily said, holding her forehead. You learn poorly from others, yet still choose to learn from this bunch. Had you used your energy to learn new knowledge from His Highness instead, you won't have made so little progress until now. This was also handed down by His Highness. Mystery Moon retorted. Why is it not considered part of His Highness' new knowledge? Other than you, there's probably no one in the Witch Union who thinks this way. Lily stared at her for a moment. I'd like to learn as well. Hummingbird mumbled softly. Nana watched the conversation going on, and laughed uncontrollably. She felt like she was back to the carefree days when she attended Teacher Carl's academy. Under the company of the 3 witches, the morning time, which was usually boring, passed quickly. They then went to the castle for lunch together, after which Nana returned to the medical center alone. As she stepped into the hall, she saw someone unexpected. Carl Van Bate. Mr. Carl. Nana said in surprise. What brings you here? To see you. Carl smiled and gazed at her, and then said happily, You have grown up. Is that so? Nana lowered her head, as if embarrassed. I'm still a long way from Anna. Everyone's different. You have your strong points. He laughed. Watching you and Anna grow up, as well as observing the town's changes, it seems that I can no longer see the cracks. What cracks? Nana was confused. Nothing. I'm just spouting nonsense. Carl shook his head. I used to believe that the god had forsaken this world, but now, I feel that it continues to watch over us. Not a god, Nana corrected him. His Highness says that these are the fruits of human efforts. Weren't those residential communities built by you? But without an origin, nothing could have happened. At that time, when I thought that Anna was dead, and you somehow awakened as a witch, I was utterly flustered. It might have been a god who heard my prayers and answered my call. Carl said in a gentle voice. It brought us His Highness Roland. Chapter 404, The Journey to Magnetoelectricity. I envy Nana so much. Mystery Moon wiped her wet hair and drew her face close to Lily, who was sitting upright at the desk. Lily replied without even turning her head. You don't ask why I envy her? You'll soon fill me in anyway, Lily said, twitching her mouth. Damn it. Mystery Moon mumbled, but could not help saying in the end, didn't you see how the soldiers at the hospital and the townsmen nearby treat her? Saw it. Hello, Miss Nana, are you leaving, Miss Angel? Miss Pine, this is the wheat cake I made. I want to be treated like that, too. Mystery Moon pressed her face onto Lily's cheek, but was pushed away relentlessly. That's a return for her ability, Lily said without turning a hair. Didn't you notice that ever since the months of the demons, she's been staying at the hospital almost every day, waiting to treat the wounded? Half of the locals have received her treatment, and the rest are pretty much their families. You're exaggerating. Not really, Lily said with a sigh and put down the book in her hand. Although not everyone will fight against demonic beasts at the city wall, it's perfectly normal for townies to get injured, miners can hurt their toes by oars, kiln laborers can get burned. The same applies to the apprentices at the steam engine plants and the chemistry laboratory. She paused for a moment and said, His Highness once told me that Nana and I are the foundation of medical care in Border Town, one of us for internal medication and the other surgery. This allows the operation to remain at an intense level, while still make sure everyone is healthy without establishing a safety policy. However, in fact, I haven't done anything except epidemic prevention for new refugees. So you're feeling sour like me? Mystery Moon said, leaning over unyieldingly. No, I'm not. Lily fired. And stay away from me. You're interfering with my reading. Mystery Moon chickened and said, but I'm really envious of her. Then learn from Nana. Take the initiative to help every townie until they know you and get familiar with you. Then surely everybody will say hello to you wherever you go, said Lily, shrugging her shoulders. But I don't have an ability like Nana's, Mystery Moon said, frustrated. Then use your physical strength if not your ability, said Lily, mocking. Regardless, you've been there at the camps of the Witch Cooperation Association. You, rascal. Mystery Moon still nursed a grudge when she went to bed. She knew that Lily was right, but being inferior to the other witches chafed her pride. This was intolerable. She had gone through so much pain before finally finding an ideal place to settle down, and idling about all day was torture. Mystery Moon slept fitfully all night. She knocked on Roland's office door with dark circles below her eyes the following day. What's the matter? The prince asked in surprise. Were you bullied? By Lily. No, never mind. She leaned dramatically on Roland's desk and asked, Your Highness, didn't you say that I have great potential? Why's there no change in my ability yet? It really can't evolve unless I understand natural science theoretical foundation? I see, Roland said, trying in vain to suppress his laughter. Actually, I've been thinking about this problem, too. What problem? Didn't Agatha say that over 400 years ago, the witches at the Union experienced high awakening even without a comprehensive understanding of the world? Apart from basic practices, the rest will be a sudden enlightenment. This could be achieved by the observation of natural phenomena, or by an accidental flash of inspiration. Roland continued, however, the latter is apparently not comparable to the awakening inspired by systematic learning. Look at Agatha's magic power. She's not only the weakest one among the evolved witches, but she can't even compete with some of the ordinary witches such as Sylvie and Andrea. Doesn't matter, as long as it evolves. Mystery Moon's eyes were sparkling. You've got an idea? It may not work, the prince said, throwing up his hands, but it's worth a try. What do you know about magnetic forces? A force produced by the directional movement of electrons, which a magnetic field acts on the magnetic bodies and electric currents in it. That was copied from the book, he smiled and said. You memorized it well, but you probably don't understand it at all. Mystery Moon hesitated for a moment and nodded. You've seen lines of magnetic forces simulated by iron powder. You also know the direction of magnetic forces, and have seen the DC generator, too. So I think, you may not enable closed circuits to quickly cut lines of magnetic forces, yet you can change the magnetic field you form, thereby personally experiencing the transformation from magnetism to electricity. I don't quite follow you. The nature of the transformation from magnetism to electricity is the change in magnetic flux. If you want to change the magnetic flux in a constant magnetic field, the only way is to change the area, that is, to cut magnetic induction lines. The prince drew a diagram on the paper and said, What if the area remains constant? That'll be changing the magnetic field, which means changing the magnetic flux. Mystery Moon groped unsuccessfully for adequate words, failing because she didn't understand a word. The prince laughed and said, It's okay that you don't get it. You only need to do this, quickly release and withdraw your magnetic forces rather than continuously use your power. And then? Mystery Moon waited for Roland to continue. Nothing more. He shook his head. This is the only step. Huh? Just release and withdraw magnetic forces? Correct. If you can also change the direction of lines of magnetic forces, that would be perfect. For example, switch from the left hand to the right hand. The prince smiled and said, While you practice, I'll prepare a little toy for you. You'll know why when you get the hang of this method. 2 days later, Mystery Moon received what His Highness called a little toy. It was a square frame made of copper wires, the top of which was connected to a glass ball no bigger than half of a fist. Taking a closer look, she could see the copper wires were cut open in the ball, and were connected by a much finer metal wire. An accompanying instruction manual read, Hold the 2 ends of the square frame with both hands and practice. Note, be sure to draw the curtains and hide the stone of light. What the heck is that? She scratched her head and then did what the instruction manual instructed, it's practice no matter how I do it. Just ignore it, and it'll be fine. Mystery Moon learned that it was not hard to quickly release and withdraw her power, but changing the direction of magnetic forces delivered a blinding headache. Magnetic force was an essential power to her, and at first, this endeavor was akin to breathing with only one nostril at a time. Although Mystery Moon had restrained herself from playing poker games and been dutifully practicing her new skill for the last 2 days, the result lasted merely half a minute. She took a deep breath and summoned the magic power in her body. At first she felt nothing, but soon she saw a flash of red light. The metal wire in the glass ball turned orangey red, and the light became increasingly bright and intense. In a few seconds, the light was glaring. Mystery Moon almost could not believe her eyes. The inkily dark room was lit by soft light much purer than the candle light, which she had never seen. She was still in a daze when the red light faded away, accompanied by a feeble popping sound before the darkness enveloped the room again. Chapter 405, A Company. The next morning, Mystery Moon ran to the office in a hurry with bigger dark circles under her eyes. Why would the glass ball light up? It didn't work afterwards. No matter how hard I tried to apply my power, she could not wait to spit it all out after pushing open the door. That fast? The prince was a little surprised. He put down the quill, took the small object from Mystery Moon and said, I thought it would take you 2 or 3 days. Mystery Moon bent over, propped up her chin on the edge of the desk, and asked with a blink, what on earth was glowing? That was electric light. The prince smiled and said, You released lightning from the sky. Lightning? She could not help repeating the word in a quiet voice, and then shook her head. But it didn't look like it at all. This light was a red-orange color, and kept glowing. Lightning is always just a flash. The lightning lit the filament, making it glow continuously. The prince twisted the glass ball and took it off, then said, It's fine that you don't understand it. I'll let you see the real electric light later. Mystery Moon's eyes were wide open. She gazed at Roland's every single movement, afraid of missing something. The prince drew the 2 copper wires closer and put the glass ball back again. There you go. Now continue to practice. That's it? She took the wire frame, utterly disappointed. That's right, the prince covered his mouth and said, and don't forget to draw the curtains when practicing. Lily was sitting at the end of the bed reading Natural Science Theoretical Foundation when Mystery Moon returned to the bedroom. Why are you up so early today? She asked in surprise. Since you're up, bring me breakfast. An omelette and bread, please. No porridge. No, I won't bring breakfast for a traitor, Mystery Moon said with a grunt. She drew the curtains, and the room turned completely dark in an instant. Hey, what are you doing? Lily frowned and asked. Practicing my ability. She threw herself on the floor and said, Draw the curtains and hide the stone of light, that's His Highness' requirement. Fine, fine, the little girl rolled her eyes and said, I'll do my reading in the hall. No, you can't. Mystery Moon hollered. Why? Lily darted her a look. I can't read when I'm starving, and I have to stay with you here? Mystery Moon paused a moment. I'll bring you breakfast. Can you stay here? What? Lily asked with great interest. Are you afraid of the dark? Not at all. She puffed out her cheeks and muttered after a while, I just need company. She wanted somebody to witness her progress and be amazed at her ability. Even if she failed, she hoped someone would still comfort her, but she would rather carry these words to her grave than confide in Lily. Okay then. I'll stay with you this time, since you sound so pathetic, Lily said with a yawn. Breakfast, quick. Mystery Moon finally got ready to practice after reluctantly bringing the breakfast over. Lily swallowed the egg and content and asked, What are you going to do? Magnetize the stuff in your hand? No, I'm going to let the magnetic forces in my hand change quickly. His Highness says that'll produce thunder and lightning. Lily was stunned. Thunder and lightning? Yeah, I'm going to start. Hold on, the little girl shouted, drawing closer to the door. It's good now. Go ahead. Mystery Moon exhaled a long breath and mobilized her magic power as she had earlier. If this happened at the camps of the Witch Cooperation Association, Supervisor Kara would definitely scold her for such behavior. However, His Highness had intentionally replaced all the wares in the bedroom that contained iron, including iron nails with copper-made items, making it easy for her to practice. She was generously treated in Border Town and would not allow herself to sit idle. Reminiscences of her experience in the town swarmed back upon her, image by image, as vivid as a merry-go-round. This time Mystery Moon found herself quickly in a ready state. The magic power danced between her hands with increased movement and growing intensity. Then she saw the electric light. Like a blue ghost revealing itself from layers of clouds, the light was transient and disappeared instantly. Nevertheless, she clearly saw a trace of electric light. It was like a tiny arc, spanning from one end of the copper wire to the other, bursting out gentle popping sounds. It was far from the end. Then came a second arc, and then a third. She noticed in dismay that every time the magnetic forces transformed, there was dazzling electric light springing up, the traces of which also changed correspondingly with its movements. With the direction of magnetic forces quickly switching back and forth, a bridge of blue and white gradually took shape between the two copper wires. "What's that?" Lily, who stood far away, asked, her eyes wide open. The electric light was insignificant compared with the red-orange blaze of yesterday, but it made Mystery Moon quiver in excitement. This was her first time witnessing her own ability. In comparison to the invisible lines of magnetic forces she could not understand in the slightest, the rhythm at which the electric arc danced and the direction of its movement were completely under her control. This was truly lightning created by her. Electricity generates magnetism, and vice versa. That's what it is. She sensed the power in her body had become more visible and clear. Mystery Moon got up on her feet and put the metal frame on the desk. She slowly released her hands to let the magic power die down, but the ends of the copper wires were still glittering, like flickering stars in the darkness from a far distance. She now had a better understanding of these words. In other words, electricity is magnetism, and vice versa. Roland kneaded his sore neck with a quill between his teeth. "Do you need a hand?" Nightingale's voice popped up by his ears. "Ah, thank you," he nodded slightly and said. Nightingale thus laid her two fair hands on Roland's shoulders and started to massage his neck with just the right amount of strength. Roland half closed his eyes, enjoying this moment of serenity. In order to draft the first code of the town, which would later serve as the basic laws of all the primary laws, he had been up earlier than even the guards for the past 3 days. It wasn't until today that he finally finished the draft. As Roland had no knowledge of the laws, he could only jot down some 10 articles in plain language based on his understanding of the system, which was no longer than 2 pages altogether. Nonetheless, these articles contained ideas and ideology from the New World. He believed this code would enable him to carry out a brand new system which was entirely different from the ancient feudal system across the whole continent while expanding his territory. With this code as its base, his new kingdom would indubitably distinguish itself from the others. "Your Highness." The office door was suddenly flung open. Mystery Moon rushed in with the copper wire frame in her hand, shouting, "I finally got it." Roland opened his eyes, and saw the girl withdraw her hands and put the little toy on the desk. "Look." She did not touch the wire frame, but there was still an arc of light where the copper wires were cut open. Looking at this incredible scene, Roland could not help dropping his jaw. The quill slid off the corner of his mouth and fell on the floor. Chapter 406, The Limitation of Magic Power. What did I just see? A self-generating system of electricity that doesn't need an external energy supply. Mystery Moon's ability is an attaching type of magic, so the answer is clear. She's added a brand new property to the metal frame, and her magic power acts as the energy supply, Roland mused to himself. How did you manage to do that? Roland asked aloud. When you said that there's an intertwining relationship between electricity and magnetism, and that they're indivisible, I wondered if I could make the objects generate lightning by magnetizing them. I tried to add a constantly changing magnetic forces to the copper wires because you've said creating electricity requires changes in magnetic forces. Then it turned out this way, Mystery Moon answered cautiously, her eyes sparkling with expectation. That's why. Changes in electric currents do produce magnetic fields, but magnetic fields only generate electricity under certain circumstances. It requires both closed circuits and changes in magnetic flux. Changes in the magnetic area and magnetic forces both need external energy supply. Mystery Moon's new ability has replaced an energy supply with the self-changing magnetic force, the prince concluded. Roland would have thought it was a perpetual motion machine prototype, if he saw it in modern times. Yet here in this world, he understood that powers of witches could not be judged by common sense of his time. The magnetic property added to the objects might not be produced by magnetic poles, just as the black fire was not natural fire. They were tangible forms of the magic power. He could only wonder whether Mystery Moon had noticed any magnetic force change in objects to which she attached her magic power. When Roland asked her about it, she nodded and then shook her head. When I was in the Witch Cooperation Association, I once wanted to change the magnetism of objects according to my will. To avoid causing my sisters any trouble, I tried to make the objects less magnetic when they were not in use. However, it didn't work. Their magnetic force remained the same. I thought it was impossible, so I gave up on it, she said. Just as I expected, Roland thought. He cocked his head towards Nightingale and said, the form of her magic power. They have been united. Nightingale stepped out of her mist and smiled. The two are now one. Mystery Moon gasped, did I really? Yes, you did. Your ability has evolved. Roland confirmed. Only a long-term and relentless dedication of practice can lead to enlightenment and evolution that fast. You did a great job. From now on, you'll be the 6th evolved witch in the Witch Union. Congratulations. Nightingale went to Mystery Moon and patted her head, smiling. Now, am I able to do more for your highness? She asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Yes, countless things, Roland smiled and said. As I've told you before, you've got great potential. But first, go rest. You have dark circles as huge as fists around your eyes. I'll test your ability in the afternoon. Yes, she nodded vigorously. After Mystery Moon left the office, Nightingale purposefully shut the door and turned her attention to Roland. Ignoring her regular perchy at either Roland's desk or the French window, she drew close to him. Grasping his shoulders and leaning in to speak, she stood so close that strands of her fair hair tickled his face. He felt his heart beating violently at the sight of her bright eyes and soft, red lips. Eh? What's going on? Is she asking for it in broad daylight? Tell me the method. These were not the words that the prince had expected to hear from Nightingale. Wait, what's this have to do with anything? What method? He asked. The method to evolve without reading natural science theoretical foundation, she said excitedly. I can tell from Mystery Moon's grades that she doesn't understand the contents of the book, but you taught her how to evolve and gain a new ability. What should I do? Practice with little toys as well? She is asking for the evolvement method. What a pity, no, a relief. Roland thought and cleared his throat, putting himself together. I'm afraid your ability won't evolve through a sudden flash of enlightenment, he said. Why not? According to Agatha, only observing natural phenomena related to your ability can provoke an evolvement. Your mist is just too incredible for me to understand, let alone guide you to learn about it. Roland explained. Maybe the only method for you to develop your magic power is a sound understanding of natural science, physics, and even advanced mathematics. Nightingale's face fell. She feebly walked to the couch and sank back into it, feeling as if her body was hollowed out. After lunch, Roland spent the whole afternoon conducting a comprehensive test on Mystery Moon's new ability. He named it Variable Magnetic Force. It could be applied to any object like her magnetizing ability, and it would create periodic variation based on the magic power she initially conjured. However, as far as insulators, no electricity would be generated. Roland determined that Mystery Moon's magic power was the weakest of the evolved witches. She could only light up 2 magic stones embedded in the sigil of God's will, half a stone less than even Maggie. Unfortunately, the attaching type magic ability required a vast amount of magic power. The greater and longer variations in magnetic forces, the greater demand for magic power. After a series of tests, Roland found that Mystery Moon's new ability could serve as a stable battery, but it was far from sufficient to drive a large electric motor or power a steam engine. He tested her ability by transforming an old DC motor, initially used for the electrolysis of water, into an electric motor, and the result was disappointing. The motor, which consumed all of Mystery Moon's magic power to add a magnetic force, could only work half-day. That meant her new ability could not practically be used as a source power. Roland didn't tell Mystery Moon the bad results. Instead, he encouraged her to keep studying and practicing her new ability, because she was fragile and he feared bad news would be devastating. Besides, he knew that ability evolvement was not a sudden transformation, but a metamorphosis through learning. Roland remembered something he had heard from Agatha, the method to jointly produce Stone of Light. He thought, if there is a witch who can control or transfer magic power, Mystery Moon's power limitation won't be a problem anymore. In the evening, he went to talk to Tilly Wimbledon. An assistant witch with a controlling type of magic, she said after hearing the prince's idea. She thought for a while and answered, no witch of the Sleeping Island has that kind of ability. Really? He asked, heaving a sigh. It seems that Mystery Moon has to depend on herself to improve. Yet what Tilly said next cheered him. However, I know where you can find the witch you want. Chapter 407, Tilly's questioning. You mean, she didn't follow you to Sleeping Island? The prince soon got what Tilly meant. Exactly. Princess Tilly shook her head helplessly. Her name is Spear Passy and her ability is magic power channeling. She can channel magic powers of several witches. In other words, a witch at one end of the channel can borrow magic powers from other witches connected, so you may need her help. Tilly paused for a while and continued. She lives right in Fallen Dragon Ridge. Since you know so much about her, you must have contacted her. Roland asked for further explanation. And what are the reasons for her to stay there? There's a risk that she'll be caught by the church. After a moment of silence, Tilly answered, that's because she's a Marquess and Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. Lord? He was startled, a witch. Yes, her father Marquis Passy, the last lord, gave the title and the territory to her, instead of to his second and third son. Due to her high rank, Spear can conceal her witch identity pretty well, and thus can lead a far better life than ordinary witches, Tilly said slowly, and she contacted me first and offered her help during the migrations. Because of her, I was able to quickly gather the witches from the towns in the southern and middle parts of the kingdom. She contacted me first. Roland sensed something strange thereinto and asked, wait. She didn't intend to give a shelter to her fellow witches? No, Tilly shook her head. Not only that, she also wanted those witches to leave her territory as soon as possible and protect themselves from being tortured by the church. Spear apparently values her lord title more. Her lord title would no doubt be in danger if the church found she was protecting witches. Unlike towns in the remote border area, Fallen Dragon Ridge had well-established churches and priests, and their believers greatly outnumbered those in the western region. Roland understood her choice but was still astonished. If a witch in her territory is seized, will she? I asked her the same question, Tilly said with some sadness, and Spear Passy bluntly told me if a witch was caught by the people, she would try to replace her in the jail with a death row prisoner and secretly send her out of her territory, but if a witch was caught by the verdict army or judged by the church, she would just stand by. Roland thought, it turned out that Spear Passy voluntarily got in touch with Tilly because of the hidden danger of witches in Fallen Dragon Ridge. That was why Tilly chose to leave for the fjords, which was a new place for her despite the risk of crossing the channel, instead of settling down in Fallen Dragon Ridge. At this thought, he frowned and asked Tilly, if I invite her to Border Town, will she come? I won't bank on that, but you may have a try. Tilly threw up her hands and said, I'm just telling you where you can find her but I'm not promising anything. Roland made a long sigh and said, "I'll send a messenger to talk to her first." Without doubt, he would choose Nightingale as the messenger, given that she was able to avoid eyes and ears of the people when she got into the castle, and that she could also discern lies. As long as she made Spear believe she held no hostility, Spear would probably not overreact, either. It generally took 5 or 6 days to travel from Border Town to Fallen Dragon Ridge by boat, but that trip would only cost Maggie half a day. They could bring Lightning, who acted faster, as a helper. The 3 witches formed a team of the highest mobility in the Witch Union, and now equipped with guns, they could both attack enemies and defend themselves. Thinking about the plan for quite a while, Roland made up his mind. Assuming that the Marquise did not agree to come, it was still a matter of time for him to investigate the situation of her territory. As an important passage on the way to the southernmost region, Fallen Dragon Ridge was included in his spring attack plan. "I heard there's a newly evolved witch in the castle." Tilly suddenly switched the topic. "Ah, you mean Mystery Moon." "Yes, she did cohere her magic power," Roland nodded and told Tilly about her evolvement process. "But using the ancient witch's method to evolve is not very effective in increasing her magic power. To become someone like Anna, it still requires the thorough understanding of solid knowledge." "But the ancient way is still a method," Tilly said with interest, "and there's a point I find very interesting in what you said just now." "What did you mean by they're not natural phenomena but only concrete forms of magic powers?" "That was my personal speculation." He picked up his cup and had some tea. "Neither Anna's heart fire nor her black fire is something you can find in nature, so it's not hard to view them as concrete forms of magic powers, but what about the normal fires before the evolvement?" "So I assume the normal fires were also created by magic powers, and that it reflected what Anna perceived as heat. As her perception became more thorough and profound, the images of heat also changed. This explains exactly what Agatha has experienced. Many witches have similar abilities before their evolvement because they've observed the same natural phenomenon. After high awakening, their abilities vary because their understandings of the phenomenon have huge differences." "Sounds quite reasonable," Tilly replied without saying yes or no, "but according to your speculation, the witches of the same kind will evolve almost the same new abilities if they've same understandings of the phenomenon, right?" "Yes, pretty much like that, but under the condition that they've got exactly the same understanding abilities." Roland did not tell her another idea of his, which was to what extent magic powers could evolve. Since magic power forms the foundation of all kinds of abilities, it is elementary and universal. Provided that there is a witch who understands everything in the nature, will she be able to display all kinds of abilities? "Are you coming from a world without magic power?" Tilly suddenly questioned. Poof, the tea nearly gushed out of the prince's mouth. He wiped his mouth and asked, What did you say?" "I've gone through all the books written by you during this month and always felt something was wrong." Princess Tilly looked at him in the eye. "I finally see what the problem is after hearing what you said just now. You separate magic power from the nature. Neither natural science theoretical foundation nor elementary physics mentions anything about magic power, and you said concrete expressions of magic power were not something existing in the nature, but magic power itself is a part of the nature." Roland was stunned. He suddenly realized that he completely forgot Tilly lived in a world where magic power naturally existed. So did the previous Prince Roland, but he just placed magic power in a position opposite to natural phenomena and seemed to get used to it. Blame the excess memories coming all of a sudden for this careless mistake? It probably won't work this time. It is acceptable to say that Prince Roland wrote these books based entirely on his memories, but how to explain that he firmly believes in them and subconsciously separate magic power from the nature? Is it possible for him to pledge that this is still the memory of the previous Prince Roland's? Roland swallowed hard. Chapter 408, The Conundrum. He couldn't believe that she was digging holes for him using the books that he wrote himself. When faced with such complicated information, most people struggled to even understand it, let alone to notice its flaws. It was pretty unbelievable that there was no mention of magic power at all in a science book studying the nature of everything in the world. Roland had also completely wiped the fourth prince's memories from his mind, and besides trying to mimic the prince during his first month after traversing the space and time, he never considered it ever again. His ministers were afraid to question him, and he didn't have to hide who he was from the witches, so he became more and more careless. However, Tilly was no ordinary witch. Besides being Prince Roland's sister, she was also an extraordinary. Not only was she able to quickly finish all of his books, but she also shrewdly noticed this inconsistency. Her logic was just as clear as that of any modern person who had undergone universal education. In addition, she used leading questions to prove her point so that he had no chance of arguing his way out. This was a disaster. Roland's brain was spinning with frantic thoughts, but he had no idea how to respond to her. Any forced explanation to someone who could notice this inconsistency would only arouse more suspicion, and lying to cover a lie would only create even more issues. Tilly broke the awkward silence and said gently, "You don't have to answer me right now. It's late, and I'm going back to the witch house. You should get some rest too, Your Highness." Okay. Roland stared into the eyes of this gray-haired woman, trying to understand her thoughts, and forgot to send her off. Tilly stopped at his office door, turned around and asked, "I can trust you, right?" Usually, Roland would have confidently agreed, but in that moment, he found himself struggling to respond and could only manage a slow nod. After the door closed, Nightingale said, confused, "How could she just leave like that? Why do you look so upset?" Roland scoffed at her. "I was so close to hearing about your true life story." Nightingale stuck out her tongue. "Why didn't she press on you harder?" "Because she didn't want to risk our friendship." The prince heavily sighed. "What?" "No, nothing." Roland leaned back in his chair and felt a chill on his back. Tilly's behavior was absolutely perfect because she didn't push him too far. Border Town was definitely the biggest ally to the sleeping island, and allies were more important than identities in the face of their enemies. If she strained their relationship by asking too much, it would only mean bad news for the witches of the sleeping island. That was why Tilly left him some time to recover after posing her question. However, this didn't mean that she didn't need an answer, and if he kept dragging his feet, he could also lose her trust right after they defeated their enemies together. She had made her move, and it was time for him to respond. However, Roland couldn't tell Tilly the truth, at least not at the moment. Anna and Nightingale were different because they knew only him from the very beginning, but Tilly was Prince Roland's little sister. Until he figured out what her real thoughts on her brother were, he would have to keep this secret to himself. He shook his head and dismissed these annoying thoughts. Roland turned to Nightingale and said, "You heard our conversation earlier, too. What do you think about checking out the situation with Maggie and Lightning?" "No problem, Your Highness. It's not just going to be a simple chat." "To be honest, I'm a little worried about you," he slowly said. What's there to be worried about?" Nightingale stuttered. I'm fine, even if I have to drag her back." "That's exactly what I'm worried about." Roland slammed on the table. "What do you mean drag her back? Are you trying to have her tear us to shreds?" "Listen, you have to be careful this time and check out the situation before you confront Spear Passy. It's alright if she refuses, just don't threaten her. As a fellow witch, she'll be no stranger to you." Is that all?" she asked disappointedly. "That's all in regards to witches." Roland frowned. "Additionally, you need to help Lightning record the layout of Fallen Dragon Ridge's surroundings, fortifications, sentries, and armies, and then return as quickly as possible." Nightingale murmured in acknowledgement. "And finally," Roland said, pausing, "be safe. This the most important thing. Can we get another pint of ale over here? Hey, is my oatmeal ready?" Coming. Sorry for the wait." Otto Luashi entered the pub, covert trumpeter, and was instantly surrounded by chaotic chatter. A crackling fire warmed him, and a smell of sour and musty body odor made him cringe. As a nobility, Otto rarely set foot into commoners' areas and was not used to being in close quarters with them. If not for his appointment with the rats, he wouldn't be caught dead in this back alley pub in the outer city. Following local rules, he quickly found his target, a skinny man wearing a hood sitting in an unlit corner of the pub, enveloped in the shadows. A small piece of bone lay next to his hand. Otto sat across the man and said, "Cheers to skeleton fingers." "You don't have liquor to give cheers." "But I have the thing measuring all things on earth." He spoke the code word. The man shrugged. "Call me Hood." "I heard you're here to get some information?" Otto nodded. While Timothy was stalling on giving him a response, he hadn't been able to rest and was busy asking around about the rebel king, someone who could hold the Western Territory for half a year after the king's ascension and completely stump Timothy was surely with a force to be reckoned with. The fastest way to gain as much information as possible was through the rats. This was the sixth rat Otto had spoken to, and the information he had gained startled him. The legendary rebel king, Roland Wimbledon, fourth son of King Wimbledon III, was not showing any signs of weakening and was even challenging the new king with the threat of an attack to dethrone Timothy. This man was also true to his word. Although Timothy went to great lengths to hide the news, Otto was still able to find out about the strange collapse in King City. If this news was true, an alliance with Timothy was questionable at best. He needed to get to the bottom of all this to protect the Kingdom of Dawn. "That's right," Otto Luashi whispered. "I want to know about the giant crash and collapse in the King City Palace 3 months ago." Chapter 409, A Reliable Ally. "You've come to the right man," Hood smiled and said in a raspy voice that made it hard to tell his age. "Even though I live in the outer city, I happened to be near the palace on the day of the incident, and as soon as I heard the crash, I ran to the palace gate. You have no idea how terrifying the crash was, because it sounded like lightning hitting the earth. All the surrounding windows, whether paper or glass, were shattered by an invisible force, and some people were even scared to death by the sudden sound. Every rat claimed to be nearby and to have witnessed everything, but each person's story was different from the other." "Okay, no need to ramble on about unimportant things. How did it happen?" Otto Luashi interrupted and asked. "Was this incident really related to the fourth prince, Roland Wimbledon?" Hood cleared his throat and stretched out his right hand. "I can answer that, but you need the thing measuring all things on earth, right?" Otto opened his wallet. "How much?" The so-called thing measuring all things on earth was nothing more than a gold royal. Only uncultured people like rats would use such an obvious code word or phrase to appear mysterious. The rat stuck up 2 fingers. Otto took out 2 gold royals and placed them in Hood's hand. "This is not a small fee, so I hope your information lives up to it." "Of course. The reputation of skeleton fingers rests upon this." The rat smiled greedily and pocketed the gold royals. "A rat's reputation is as ridiculous as a ruler's mercy." Otto sniffed. "Go ahead. I'll start by answering your first question." After his payment, Hood's posture was much more relaxed. He sipped his ale, leaned back in his chair, and pointed towards the ceiling. "Thunder comes from the sky." "What do you mean?" Otto frowned. "Didn't you want to know what caused the crash?" the rat whispered. "All thunder comes from the sky, and this was no exception. I saw it with my own eyes. Before the crash, a white rock floated into the palace, and then the incident happened." "Nonsense. You mean to tell me that a huge rock fell from the sky and smashed the palace into pieces?" "Hee hee, everything I said is true, or else skeleton fingers wouldn't assign me this task. If you think I'm lying, you can leave right now." Hood shrugged. "But you won't get your fee back. Keep going." Otto tried to repress his annoyance. "The rock entered the palace only seconds after it appeared, but I could clearly tell that it wasn't that big or fast and didn't like something that could destroy the Hall of Sky Dome, which is why I said it floated. Also, when the crash and smoke appeared, I saw a menacing flash of fire that definitely wasn't caused by the collision," Hood said, smacking his lips. "I mean, His Highness Timothy's search afterwards proved this very point. He closed off and cleared the inner city multiple times without arresting any suspects, and the palace is heavily guarded, so where else could the attack be from if not the sky?" He took another sip of ale. "As for the fire and smoke, They resemble the phenomenon caused when an alchemy solution called snow powder burns, which is why I'm certain that this was an attack. By the way, I also have some information about snow powder, but you'd have to pay only a little more. No need, I don't want to know. Otto interrupted. He had already heard through other channels about snow powder, which was originally used in celebrations but could be modified into a weapon. Rats probably didn't know anything about its specific content, so he didn't feel like wasting his money. Alright, now I'll answer your second question, Hood said, splaying his hands indifferently. This incident was certainly related to Prince Roland. Why? When did you arrive in King City? Of course, I'm not trying to ask about your background or identity, since that's a rule of Blackstreet, so you don't have to answer me. The rat smiled. What I mean is, if you arrived in King City in early autumn, you'd know this. His Highness sent thousands of soldiers to attack Western region, but only very few returned, all bearing letters from Prince Roland to His Highness. All 6 rats had mentioned this, which meant that it was probably true, but he continued to ask, are you talking about the warning of revenge? It sounds quite scary. Are you sure it's not pure folklore? Most letters were brought by the soldiers into the palace, and the few that were leaked were mostly seized by the city hall, but Skeleton Fingers always surprises its clients. I actually have a preserved warning with me. Hood stuck up 5 fingers. Considering it's a very rare letter from Prince Roland himself, the price is slightly higher. What do you think? Otto Luashi returned to the palace, and Belinda immediately stood up to greet him. Any news? Not much, but I did get my hands on a letter from Prince Roland. He handed the wrinkly piece of paper to her, took off his coat, sat next to the fireplace, and told her all about what he had learned. All 6 rats gave similar answers to the second question, and this paper proves them right. Roland Wimbledon is not as weak as the king says he is, but the complete opposite. If the Kingdom of Dawn allies with Timothy, we may benefit very little and gain a tricky enemy. But all the rats' answers to the first question were different, Belinda said with a frown. This proves that the attack was very mysterious and difficult to understand, and I kind of believe what the last rat said. Otto sipped his hot tea and sighed. Spending too much time in the cheap pub made him very uncomfortable. From the sky? Belinda gaped at him. Are you crazy? Of course not. If I hadn't seen this letter, I wouldn't dream of it either. Roland was very confident about the time and location of the attack, and only an attack from the sky would be able to pass the high city wall and strong fortifications, confusing even the shrewdest rats. He frowned. However, what's more important is what we do next. With the imminent threat from the church, they should stop fighting each other and join forces against their common enemy. That's not for us to decide. Otto shook his head. The only thing we can do is to find a reliable ally for the Kingdom of Dawn. His Highness Timothy Wimbledon seems a little unreliable. Are you really going to go to Western Region? Belinda was shocked. Isn't that a place currently facing the dangers of the months of the demons? It's nothing compared to the danger of our kingdom collapsing, he said after some silence. You can stay here and wait for the new king's response, while I travel alone to Western Region. Chapter 410, Expectations. The water vapor formed an even layer of white mist resembling thin gauze on the window pane. Chilly wind blew on the windows with a popping sound, which contrasted with the tranquil fireplace burning in the room. Scroll sat in front of a long desk in the City Hall office, reading rolls of thick documents. Those documents were not about education but were statistics reported by various departments. She used her free time to memorize such information in case someone needed it. This was recently the main part of her work since there was not much to deal with in the Ministry of Education. After all, the second round of assessment ended not long ago, and another round wouldn't be carried out before next summer. Having worked for His Highness Roland for half a year, she found out His Highness was particularly interested in statistics. He liked it when his subordinates described things with a long series of precise numbers. He frequently used terms such as horizontal ratio, year-on-year ratio, and chain relative ratio. Subsequently, all the staff in the City Hall had picked up this habit from him. As the township population grew, the related statistical work increased correspondingly. Therefore, His Highness entrusted this work to Scroll and jokingly called her the database of Border Town. Although the nickname made her sound like a warehouse, His Highness described it as something extremely important. With the help of a database, he said he could estimate the development of next year and make economic and military plans. He even said all his future decisions concerning the territory would be based on the data analysis. Lady Scroll. A woman dressed as an apprentice pushed open the office door and entered the room. After bowing to Scroll, she handed her an application form. "Hello, my name is Freya. His Excellency Carter from the Department of Justice wishes to acquire the information on refugees who passed the resident verification within the last week. Due to her limited ability to derivative skills, His Highness ordered that anyone who wanted to inquire complex data must get consent from bearer first. As for individual data, one could ask Scroll at any time." "Wait a minute." Scroll glanced at the signature on the application form, summoned the Book of Magic, and showed the corresponding contents on its pages. "All right. Give this to Mr. Carter." Thank you." Freya carefully held the book that came out of thin air as if it was a demonic beast. "Don't worry. It won't hurt you." Scroll could not help but laugh. Most people had such an expression when they saw the Book of Magic. "You do not need to return the book to me because it will vanish 4 hours later. However, according to the Constitution of Confidentiality, you aren't allowed to give it to anybody other than Carter." "Yes, my lady." Freya bowed and retreated. While she pushed open the door, Scroll saw a sea of people in the hall, and a chattering sound instantly rushed into her room, quieting down again when the door was closed. This was a weekend, which was supposed to be a rest day, but the city hall was still as busy as on workdays. Everybody was excited about the upcoming construction of Border Town, so they worked particularly hard. With the salary reward for overtime offered by His Highness, no one was willing to stay at home. Scroll didn't understand His Highness's decisions. To her, there wasn't that much work to be done in the city hall, and compared to the labors of miners and furnace workers, writing official documents, collecting data, and making reports took much less effort, yet these were the main jobs of the city hall. His Highness only had to give orders, and everyone would easily comply. There was really no need to raise the salary in this regard. Compared to most of the nobilities, His Highness appeared to be too benevolent. Truthfully, Scroll didn't think His Highness Roland seemed like a real lord. Yet, it was exactly such a person who led everybody to this stage, which was nearly a miracle. She didn't come to this conclusion due to her respect and trust for Roland, but due to clear data. Compared with 1 year ago, when only miners had a stable income in Border Town, the wages of miners, furnace workers, and handymen had doubled now, although they used to earn the least. Some emerging occupations such as assemblers in the steam plant and operators in the acid plant had had their wages raised 8-fold, and the number of workers was still on the rise. The changes within the town itself were so obvious that if a person hadn't lived here 1 year ago, he might find it very hard to believe that such changes were possible. Scroll touched the words on the document. She couldn't imagine how the territory would continue to transform under His Highness' leadership, but she firmly believed it would have a future full of hope and surprises. "Miss Scroll." The wooden door was pushed open, and His Highness Roland's guard stepped in. "His Highness wants to see you." When she returned to the 3rd floor of the castle, Scroll saw that His Highness was organizing pieces of the manuscript. "Would you like me to record these things?" Tying her black hair up, which was messed up by the cold wind, she stepped up and asked the prince. "That's right. It took at least half of my brain cells to finish this book." The prince massaged his neck, murmuring words that were difficult for Scroll to comprehend. "Even for the knowledge that was commonly used at the time, I could only remember them generally, and I even had to deduce several formulas myself." Scroll had gotten used to this behavior. She ignored his weird terms, picked up the manuscript, realizing the letters on its cover were in an unprecedented orange color that formed the word calculus. She flipped through a couple pages, and found it impossible to understand what the book title meant. She then focused on memorizing its contents, Compared to the equations she had learned previously, she found these new formulas didn't even have numbers, but a series of bizarre symbols, like a whole set of new characters. They looked like things only Anna and Tilly would be interested in. Right, Roland asked, what's the average income of the residents here? The minimum was 10 silver royals per month, and the maximum was 40, Scroll answered without stopping her memorizing of calculus, but to calculate the average income one would need the Book of Magic, which has been used once today. That's all right. You can give me the statistical result the day after tomorrow. Roland waved his hand. I need this number to determine the fee for water and heating supply. The collective heating supply project is about to begin in a week. On its completion, this place would be as warm as spring, even through the longest winter. A city without fear for the cold. This is one of the miracles that could only happen in His Highness's territory. If I don't get extra work, I'll give you the result tomorrow. Tomorrow, it would be nice if you could turn the Book of Magic into a storybook. Roland shook his head with a smile. Or any book that Anna hasn't read. Storybook? Scroll was slightly startled before quickly understanding his reasoning. Tomorrow is Miss Anna's Day of Awakening, the prince nodded and said. Chapter 411, The Vow. With no swaying candlelight or crackling burning fire, the room was made so warm and pleasant by the heater that one wouldn't feel cold even when only wearing thin clothes. The stone of light at the bedstand brightened the room, the stable and gentle yellow light shone on the bedsheet and carpet, producing a wonderful nostalgic scene. Sitting at the bedside and listening to the occasional slight chirps from the Cali ducks, Roland felt as if he was in a dream. It was like he wasn't in a backward monarchy nor a modern society full of electronic products, rather somewhere in between, his childhood. His childhood memories very much resembled the scene in front of him. Everything was covered in a faint shade of yellow, whether it was a light bulb, a movie, or a developed photo. The only difference was that Anna wasn't in his childhood memory. At this thought, he turned and looked at the girl sitting at the edge of the bed. She was reading a storybook. Her blonde hair on her forehead glimmering under light and her long eyelashes occasionally trembling, made her look extremely moving. Yet, the most extraordinary part was her sapphire eyes, which were still as blue as a clear lake even under the reflection of the magic stone. The only difference from 1 year ago was that this pair of eyes weren't such a peaceful lake anymore. Her existence alone made the whole picture vivid. Anna is not only a different color from the rest of this whole setting, but also a marker that separates my reality from memory. Seeing her assumes me that everything is real. What are you looking at? Anna had already put down the Book of Magic and was staring at Roland. Me? Ahem. Roland shifted his eyes subconsciously, but quickly shifted them back again. That's right. After spending about a year together, the two of them had been quite familiar with each other. Roland wasn't as passive as he had been, and since they were alone in the room, he was more open about the emotions he had been holding back all this time. They looked at each other and burst into laughter at the same time. Do you think my demand is a little too stubborn? Anna shook her head and smiled. Clearly everybody cares about me, but I pushed all of them away. Don't worry about it. Roland said with his hands laid out, they were only surprised by your reaction at that time. If it weren't for the ancient methods suggested by Miss Agatha, I wouldn't have made this request, Anna said, sticking out her tongue, a cute move that she rarely made. But I assume other sisters would do the same. You'll be busy then. Roland smiled resignedly and said, I think they would only ask for a few more pieces of ice cream bread. After learning that Anna was going to have her Day of Awakening, Agatha instantly contributed her experience gained in the holy city of Tequila, according to the research of the Union, on the Day of Awakening or the Day of Adulthood, a witch needed to drain her magic power to decrease the influence of bite. Additionally, the witch's emotions were also very important. Positive emotions as happiness and contentment would greatly increase her resistance. For some outstanding witches, the Union even dispatched personnel to fulfill their wishes on their Day of Adulthood. After knowing this, Anna requested that Roland accompany her on her Day of Awakening. Thanks to Miss Agatha, I'm having a good time. She confessed. I couldn't spend my Day of Adulthood with you, but I can make up for it on my day of awakening." Watching Anna's sincere expression, Roland almost blushed. He cleared his throat, took out a thin book tied with a colorful ribbon from his back, and handed it to her. "A gift for your day of awakening." The reason why he rushed to write down the advanced calculus knowledge that he remembered was to finish it before this day. To a witch, the day of awakening was more important than a birthday and could almost be seen as a rebirth. Roland had always had difficulty choosing presents for holidays, and this time was no different. After racking his brains, he decided to give Anna new knowledge as a present. Anna had a talent for learning and an appetite for new knowledge, so he chose her gift accordingly. However, after receiving the book with orange cover, she didn't open it instantly as she used to. Instead, she put it down together with the Book of Magic. "Thank you." "The storybook. Have you finished reading it?" "Not yet." Anna slightly shook her head. "But I want to hear something special." "Special?" Roland was slightly astonished. "Yes," she said with a smile, "your story. Last time I fell asleep too soon while listening to it, and today I hope to continue hearing about it." Does she mean the day when we lay in bed together? Roland pursed his lips. He suddenly had an impulse to tell her about his true identity, and to not hide it anymore. "Do you still remember that I once told you I used to live in a big city?" By a big city, I didn't mean Kingdom of Grey Castle. "I know." "Huh?" Anna's reply was shocking to him. "When I thought about it, I found those stories you told me couldn't have happened in the palace of King's City," she said with a smile. "Don't forget, I have repeatedly read through Chronicles of Grey Castle." "Is that so?" Roland hesitated for a moment. "I actually—" "You don't have to say anything." Anna stopped him. "You are hesitating, which means it's not easy to tell, right? Then don't. Besides, it's not hard to guess. I believe I'm not the only one who has this feeling. The closer we get to you, the easier to feel this way. You are different from everybody else." She paused. "What if we take a bet?" "Bet, on what?" "Let's bet how much I can guess about your life story." Roland suddenly recalled a game he used to play when he was little, Time Capsule. The game works like this: write down your words to the future on a note, put it into a can, and take the can out a certain number of years later. Although most of the cans would be missing, a few of them would be retrieved, and looking at the note you wrote years ago would give you an unspeakable sensation. He didn't ask about the wager. It doesn't matter who wins and who loses, since she probably proposed it to comfort me, rather than to figure out my true identity. He must admit, among all the witches, Anna was the one who understood him the best. "Deal." He nodded. "Where did we stop last time?" "I finished my study under the guidance of my mentor," Roland laughed. "Let's start from here." When the light of dawn lit up the skyline, Anna peacefully passed through the first day of awakening since her adulthood. Chapter 4:12, Sneaking into the Fallen Dragon Ridge. The entire world was gloomy, from the sky to the land and sea. Although the south-central area of the Kingdom of Grey Castle wasn't covered by endless snow, the impact of the months of demons was inevitable. The sun was hidden by an expanse of grey clouds which filled the whole sky. A pale fog rose from the earth, shrouding the land, rocks, and jungles. All that was revealed was the black and grey mountain peaks above the clouds, which stretched towards the southern end of the continent, and acted as the visual guide for Nightingale and her companions. While flying in the sky on Maggie's back, Nightingale intensely experienced just how terrible the cold wind was in the open air. Even with a set of customized windproof clothes on, which were given to her by His Highness before they left, she could still feel the cold penetrating her body from her scarf and cuffs. In particular, her ears and fingers would soon get numb due to hypothermia. They often had to stop and rest for a while, making the normally half-day journey eventually extend to the next day, even flying at full speed. "Here we are." Lightning approached her. Nightingale peered out and realized the ridge had become much lower, as if it was sinking into the ground. A city built on the hillside emerged faintly from the fog, which should be their exact target, Fallen Dragon Ridge. "Let's land." She patted Maggie's back. Be careful and don't let anyone see us. Ah. Maggie nodded, folding her wings as she glided down. The mist soon enveloped the three of them as they landed. Nightingale found that the visibility around them was so low that she couldn't see clearly what was only 50 steps in front of them, let alone over a great distance. This was a good sign for the witches, at least they wouldn't be easily noticed. After entering into the mist, the true colors of the world would be revealed, but she wasn't worried about running into the church's judgment army due to the thick white fog. You just wait here, this shouldn't take long, said Nightingale. His Highness asked me to keep a lookout from the air. Lightning shook her head. And he asked me to be the emergency contact in case you kidnap the target. Coo. Maggie transformed into a fat pigeon, crouching on the top of the little girl's head. His Highness gave some meaningless commands, Nightingale thought. In that case, let's go. Suddenly, the world became black and white, the fog disappeared, or transformed into something else, which no longer hindered her vision. All of a sudden, the view became clear. The dark city wall was 200 meters away, extending out of the mountain side, and linked the city and the mountain like a dome. The stone wall was much shorter compared to the outer wall of Longsong's stronghold, and there were no sentry guards on it. Nightingale went to the side of the wall and found the entrance through the curved lines. She stepped forward and realized that she was already on the other side of the city wall. The city was half the size of Stronghold, and it was more like a small town in this area just outside of the mountain cliffs. But Fallen Dragon Ridge was located within the Rocky Mountains, and the Lord's castle built on the hillside could be seen from far away. Nightingale assured that Lightning and Maggie were following her into the city, and then she went straight towards the castle. This mission wasn't new to her and she was very proficient at it. When she served Old Guylan, it was a common assignment to infiltrate into other nobles' mansions and castles. Most of the buildings were similar in structure, and the owners always liked to live in the most spacious house right in the center. Back then, she was unable to go in through walls freely and could only conceal herself, while carefully avoiding any possible traps and the godstones of retaliation, before stealing the letters and documents hidden in the cabinet. Now with the help of the mist, she could easily do these things, since the lightless black hole presented by the godstone of retaliation, embedded at the corner of Castle's Isle, seemed as attractive as the moon hanging in the dark sky. The hidden traps could be seen clearly, as their twisted contours were like creeping earthworms, and she could easily destroy them after passing through the walls. While under the influence of her ability, Nightingale was perfectly free to move. The walls, doors, and roofs were just inconsequential to her. Walking into the largest house at the top, she found her target. Although they had never met before, Nightingale identified Marquis Spear Passy, the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge, at first sight because a magic blue light was rotating in her body, which was the only color visible in the world of the mist. Sitting in front of a desk with a quill in her hand waving back and forth, the Marquis seemed to be writing something. She was about 30 years old with wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, and the silver curls of hair and plain robes she wore made her look older. Nightingale examined the room carefully and found that there was no godstone of retaliation or trap, and that Parky's only weapon was a delicate and luxurious short crossbow hidden inside her sleeve. After leaving a mark on the side of the window, she dissolved the mist and revealed herself. Greetings, Marquis Spear Passy. Shocked by the unexpected voice, Spear Passy raised her head swiftly and saw Nightingale. She quickly calmed down and asked, "Who are you?" Nightingale remembered the scenario of her first meeting with Prince Rolandi's first reaction was to try to escape and she had to stop him by using a dagger, which in hindsight was really funny. "I'm Nightingale and I'm from border town of the western region. As you can see, I'm a witch." "I thought so, as no one can come here without an invitation, except a witch." Spear Passy pretended to be calm, as she moved one of her hands slowly into her sleeve. "You should knock on the door before coming in. Then I'd be welcomed by your guard, not you." Nightingale laughed softly. "Don't worry. I don't intend to hurt you. I just want to have a talk, so you won't need that crossbow inside your sleeve." This surprised Spear Passy and her face got more serious. "You know quite a lot." She took her hands out and crossed them in front of her chest. "Well, why are you here?" "I bring you a message from Lord of Border Town, Guardian of the Western Region, the fourth Prince of the Kingdom of Grey Castle, His Highness Roland Wimbledon." Nightingale bowed slightly. "He's creating a new order of the world that allows witches to live together with average people peacefully, and he hopes you can assist him." "Prince Roland?" Marquis frowned. "The incompetent nobility who was always laughed at by everyone?" With an absurd look on her face, she said, "This is ridiculous, Lord of Border Town. He's just a rebel banished to a wasteland." "Timothy was the real usurper," Nightingale said, "and Prince Roland will soon dethrone him. But that's beside the point. His Highness needs your magic power to strengthen the ability of a witch. Would you mind making a trip to Border Town?" Chapter 413, The Incident. Spear Passy was silent for a while before saying, "Are you threatening or inviting me?" "I'm inviting you, of course," Nightingale said. "His Highness doesn't believe in coercing witches. In fact, I don't either." "In this case, I refuse," Spear answered without hesitation. "If he really needs my help, he can bring the witches to the Fallen Dragon Ridge to visit me for the ritual of the nobility. No need to send someone sneaking in my castle. Of course, if a witch attracts the church's attention, I can't ensure her safety." The answer was just as Nightingale had expected. It was difficult to get a stranger to agree to such a difficult request. Generally, there were two means of handling this situation, coercion and inducement, but she didn't want to perform either option. Marquis Passy was the lord of the city and would be the guardian of the realm once promoted. However, His Highness did not plan to flatter her in any way. Instead, he would withdraw power from the nobles. According to His Highness, this was called the centralization of authority. In this instance, she would be degrading herself in the eyes of nobility if she was at His Highness' service. In regards to following Roland, to create a brand new world and defend in the battle of divine will, she would not believe it from word alone. "I understand." Nightingale pouted. "In this case, I shall leave." "Hold on," Spear looked surprised. "That's all? I'm responsible for bringing His Highness messages to you. Now that the message has been delivered and you've given me your answer, my task is complete." She grinned. "Were you expecting me to tie you up and bring you back with me? How did you know about my ability to channel magic?" Marquis hesitated. "Did you talk to the witches who planned to go to the Fjord Islands?" "Yes. The leader of the witches is Lady Tilly Wimbledon. She's currently in Border Town, fighting the demons with her brother." Nightingale shrugged. "His Highness heard about you from her. They didn't go to the fjords?" "No, they didn't know His Highness had gained such a firm foothold in the western region. They only got in touch after settling down on Sleeping Island." She gave a brief outline of the alliances on both sides. "Just like you, Lady Tilly was invited to the western region by His Highness. Prince Roland really established a system of coexistence for witches and ordinary people in his territory?" Spear frowned and asked. She was having a hard time believing it. "Not only that, he also evicted the church from his territory." Nightingale smiled. "Currently there are more than 10 witches living in Border Town. The locals are accustomed to their existence. I'm not lying about this." Marquis stood up and poured her a cup of tea. "Can you tell me more about it? How did he do it? If you want to know." Nightingale turned and sat at the table. It might not change her decision, but it was never a bad thing to deepen her understanding. Nightingale decided to tell her about the witch union His Highness had built, the war with Duke Ryan and the political run after the recovery of Longsong Stronghold. If Spear could understand the witch's situation, hopefully she would not resist too much when His Highness eventually unified the Kingdom of Grey Castle. A sudden rush of percussion was heard. Spear looked at Nightingale in shock. Nightingale opened the window. It was Maggie squatting outside. "Danger, coup. Lightning discovered an accident, coup. What happened?" "A troop of Judgment Army soldiers is rushing towards the castle, coup." The pigeon patted its wings and said, "There are at least 20 people, coup." The Judgment Army from the church? Nightingale turned around and frowned. Did you summon them? No. I didn't have an appointment with the church priest today. Marquis looked particularly puzzled. Could it be your whereabouts have been exposed? That's impossible. She shook her head. Unless the church has the ability to monitor every bird in the sky. That's weird, Spear murmured. If they were coming for me, they wouldn't need so many judgment warriors. It's almost the entire force. What are you waiting for? They're almost at the entrance. A golden figure darted through the window and landed lightly beside Nightingale. It was lightning. I'm not sure about the situation. I suggest that you avoid it, Nightingale said, or get the guards to stop them outside the castle and find out why they're here before proceeding. This is my castle. Where would I hide? Don't worry, these people can't enter without my permission. Otherwise, I would not have been able to protect the witches. Spear sighed. However, this meeting may have to end here. If you're not in a rush, I think. Before she could finish her sentence, a series of chaotic footsteps were heard just below the castle. The sound of swords fighting could be heard clearly in the castle, echoing in the mountains. Marquis' expression changed. Who let them in? Guards. Spear called a few names but no one responded from outside. The footsteps were approaching closer and closer. It looks like they're here for you. Nightingale made a gesture towards Lightning, indicating she should leave first. You still have time to leave, we can protect you. No, I'm not going anywhere. This is my territory, how could they be so presumptuous? She hardly finished speaking when the door was broken down by a group of heavily armed judgment warriors. The Lord was fully surrounded by warriors holding up their swords and shields. Nightingale hid in the mist, taking a step back into the corner where it was both convenient to escape and suitable for observation. She noticed that neither Lightning nor Maggie left. The former was peeking her head out from the top of a window, the latter was simply squatting on a beam, arranging her wings. These two brats are totally reckless. I'll get His Highness to discipline them well when we're back. She shook her head helplessly and shifted her eyes to the judgment warriors. Every one of them was wearing the god stone of retaliation. The dark holes were intertwined and totally obscured Spear. She could only hear the Marquis' angry rebuke. Redwine, are you crazy? You let them into my castle without permission? Of course not, wise sister. A man's voice raised within the crowd. Father was wrong to give the title to one of the devil's minions. I'm simply correcting his mistake. Chapter 414, The Conspiracy. What? What are you talking about? Spear asked in disbelief. The devil's minion? This is a complete fabrication. Fabrication or not, his reverence will draw his own conclusion. Redwine raised his voice and said. Just because you managed to deceive Father, it doesn't mean that you can deceive everyone else. Soon, people will know who you really are. You belong in hell. Did you make all these up? Spear's tone suddenly became icy cold. Or someone else put you up to it? I think the latter is true. After all, Father chose me because you and our third brother were completely useless. Shut up. Nightingale heard a rattle and the Marquis groaned in pain. Enough, bring her to the church for questioning, someone said, but she's still a member of the nobility before her verdict, so maintain your etiquette. As Spear Passy was carted away, the judgment warriors followed right behind her, and soon there were only two people left in the room. Nightingale couldn't see their faces clearly because of the effects of God's stone of retaliation, but she could tell that one of the voices belonged to Redwine, the man who spoke to the Lord. If she was not mistaken, this person seemed to be Spear's younger brother. You're doing really well, Mr. Redwine. Perhaps I shall address you as Earl going forward. So that's it, Mr. Rosad? Redwine could not hide his excitement. I really can inherit the title of Earl and become the Lord of the Fallen Dragon Ridge? Of course. As long as you abide by our agreement, you may even go further, came the reply. So, what should I do next? He asked eagerly. Can I move into my sister's room? She won't leave her cell, right? Spear Passy will soon be hanged to death as a witch in the square as per the terms of our cooperation. The other man hesitated for a moment, and continued, as for what to do next, I suggest you relay this incident to all her ministers, knights and men and divide the rights of the Marquis. Do I really have to do that? If everyone can benefit from the incident, your position will be much more secure, which will help our future plans to proceed smoothly, Roland said. If you're still confused, I can always assign a priest to you. He's very good at handling government affairs and can always advise you on any questions you may have. Yes, please, Redwine replied quickly. It'll be very helpful for us if you can hold the Lord's position, so the church is happy to help with these issues. His peals of laughter filled the room. After the men left, Nightingale emerged from the mist, followed by Lightning and Maggie. We're in trouble. She stared at both of them and said, how could the church show up at precisely the right time and place? I thought they said her brother found her true identity and revealed it to the church, Lightning said, her eyes flashing with excitement. Now we have something to do. Why didn't they find it out earlier? Why right now? I feel like something's wrong. Nightingale frowned. No matter what, we are not going to watch them execute Spear. Lightning held her head up high and said, we must save her and annihilate the church. Annihilate it, coup. The confidence of this blonde girl has inflated since defeating the demons. This is not a good sign. Nightingale shook her head and responded, we can't defeat the church for the time being. They must have participated in this conspiracy, so if we removed these people, Spear would naturally return to her position as Lord. This might be an opportunity for us. If we sneak her out, she'll probably agree to go back to Border Town with us under these circumstances. Ah, we're not fighting the church? Lightning asked, disappointment in her voice. Battling will be the very last resort since they outnumber us and have a large amount of the god stones of retaliation. It's pretty risky to try routing them all at once. Nightingale contemplated for a moment and said, I'll go to the church first and find out what's going on. There was one concern that she didn't mention. Spear Passy might be thinking that His Highness was the one framing her if the situation wasn't explained clearly. That, Nightingale knew, should be avoided at all costs. What about us? The little girl asked. Just be ready to meet me outside. The Church of the Fallen Dragon Ridge was located on the outskirts of the city. It was small and had a prayer hall, a residential area for the believers, and a 3-story tower surrounded by a wall with only one exit. None of these obstacles posed a problem for Nightingale. She had familiarized herself with the entire area by the time all of the faithful had departed in the evening. Although there were many more god stones of retaliation here than in the castle, Nightingale still managed to find her way. There was a huge god stone placed right in the middle of the hall to stifle any magic in the room, and the same was true for some corridors. However, she could always take a detour or even hop over the floor. Nightingale found the place where Spear Passy was imprisoned in the basement of the tower. She didn't seem too hurt, just a little frustrated. She intended to rescue the Marquis during the middle of the night. Nightingale snuck back into the tower after sharing her plan with Lightning and Maggie. She ascended to the top floor and hid in a magnificent room. This, she thought, would be the priest's room. He would probably spill the beans if he found me here with a dagger. When the bell of the Fallen Dragon Ridge struck 9, swung open. She drew out her dagger stealthily but didn't attack. She judged from the footsteps that there were 2 people. What an unexpected joy, said a woman's voice. Little did we know that Marquis Spear is actually a witch. It seems that we need to tweak our plan. Lady Saint, Roland answered with a very respectful tone, isn't it more convincing if she's a witch? It's different from before, because according to the will of the Supreme Pontiff, any new witch who comes to realization shall be handed over to be executed in the Holy City as soon as possible, the woman said. As for the execution, let's not hang her, but burn a masked death row criminal with a similar build. Yes, Roland answered. But why did His Holiness set such a troublesome rule of delivering a witch to Hermes? I've no idea, but according to my superiors, it's simply returning to tradition, she replied. Returning to tradition? You don't need to know too much. Just fix the matter at hand. The saint said brusquely. I'll have to head towards the Redwater City once everything is done here. Understood, Rosad answered crisply. Who is she exactly? How come even the priest is so respectful towards her? It seems they didn't know that Spear Passy was a witch before they captured her. Could it just be all a conspiracy to seize the throne of the fallen Dragon Ridge? Nightingale couldn't help but come out from her hiding place and looked at the lady while hidden in the mist, only to find that she was not wearing a god's stone of retaliation. The magic power inside of the saint was as bright as a fluorescent light in her world of black and white. She's a witch. Who's there? She responded in an instant, and a dazzling silver light shot towards Nightingale. Chapter 4:15, The Fight. Nightingale's years of fighting experience kicked into gear, and her body immediately responded before she could even think. She leaned back instinctively, and the silver light grazed her cheek. Even in the mist, she could feel the immense power of the light, extraordinarily scorching and intense. After dodging the sudden attack, Nightingale tucked into a roll and distanced herself from her opponent. What's happening, Lady Saint? Rosad asked frantically. It seems like a rat has snuck in. The witch licked her lips. Find somewhere to hide and protect yourself. You mean, there's a witch here? The priest's expression suddenly changed. I'll summon the judgment warriors. No need. I haven't hunted a witch for a long time. How could I let someone else have this priceless opportunity? Just stand by and watch me. Nightingale was observing the so-called saint during the conversation. Although she knew that the church was probably secretly raising their own witches, it still broke her heart to see the proof of this theory. This witch had entirely owned by the church, she may even have a high rank, and it sounded like she enjoyed hunting witches and did not see herself as one of them. Nightingale could not help but remember the determined eyes of the witch who attacked them at the harbor outside the king's city and stabbed Wendy. These people were no longer witches since they had chosen a completely different path. With this thought in her mind, Nightingale did not hesitate to pull out her revolver. Although she hated this kind of battle, she had no choice but to kill to stop the killing. Where do you come from? The saint tilted her head and stared towards where Nightingale was standing. If the priest can't see you, you have the power to conceal yourself. If you can dodge my attacks, you have been trained for battle or you have fought in many wars. Either way, it's quite rare for wild witches like you. Wherever I come from is none of your business, Nightingale said coldly. She noticed the ribbon that blindfolded the opponent, and it was what a blind person would do. The silver whip in the saint's hand was still curled by her side with its tip raised like a snake, waving at her. Only magic power displayed color in the mist. Was she using this strange whip to locate her? Maybe you are not aware, but the church has crowned a new pope who is compassionate, forgiving, and believes that even wild witches deserve to be saved. As long as you are willing to serve the Lord, the church can cleanse your sins off and accept you as a pure witch, the saint said with her hand on her chest. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you. If you didn't come alone and are accompanied by other fallen witches, you can all go to the holy city of Hermes together to seek your rebirth. Wow, that sounds great. Nightingale chuckled. But if awakening as a witch is a sin, and you had a way of cleansing it, why would you establish this law now instead of helping all my lost sisters from the beginning? Do you think I'm a toddler who has never heard a blatant lie before? She inhaled deeply and narrated. I have not sinned. As she said this, Nightingale broke out of the mist and pulled the trigger, and the barrel erupted in flames with a thunderous roar. The silver whip immediately flicked upwards and blocked it off the saint, spewing sparks everywhere. Then, the tip of the whip relaxed and tossed a twisted metal nugget onto the ground, which was the bullet that Nightingale just shot. This thing could block a flintlock. Oh? Her opponent raised her eyebrow. What kind of weapon is this? Her voice cooled down suddenly. I've changed my mind. It looks like you'll be dying here tonight. The silver light lunged towards Nightingale once again. This time it was divided into dozens of whips that completely surrounded her. Nightingale used her mist to swiftly back away. Unlike common objects, the whips containing magic power were immune to the mist, so she couldn't pass through them and could only try to avoid them. However, her enemy's range of attack was far too big, and the silver light struck by her side. She felt a slight numbness on her shin and she lost her balance, crashing onto the ground. The magic whips pierced into the ground behind her and pulverized the stone floor into dust. If she had been hit directly, she would have immediately lost her fighting power. Nightingale ignored the wound on her shin and shot all the bullets in her gun at once from the ground. The silver whips recoiled and turned into a spinning band of light, blocking all the bullets. She knew she had no time to reload her bullets in the mist and that once she wasn't able to hold off her enemy with her flintlock, she would be in huge trouble. It was too cramped to distance herself from her enemy, and not being able to dodge any attacks would only shrink her range of movement. She pulled out another gun in a panic, shot all the bullets randomly and ducked into the mist, and fell 2 stories down through the floor. She escaped. The saint screamed. Summon the judgment army to lock down the church, and send guards to the Marquis' cell as well since the witch might be here to see her. Escaped? Rosad glanced around him, not seeing any damage in the doors nor secret exits. Through what? The walls, the ceiling, or the floorboards, her powers go way beyond invisibility. There isn't any magic power left in the room. The pure witch gnashed her teeth and said, "Do exactly what I told you to, she's injured and won't make it too far. Tell all your men to put on the God's Stone of Retaliation bolts." Yes. After the priest left hurriedly, the pure witch immediately collapsed helplessly to the floor, her hands trembling powerlessly. Damn, what kind of weapon is this? Her abilities were all powerful, and her defense power, the magic light that could block any attack, was seen as the strongest among pure witches. No sword or bolt could ever penetrate it. In order to strengthen her powers, she was constantly using her magic light. After more than 10 years, she was able to carry such an immense amount of magic power that hundreds of arrows were futile, and she had never exhausted her magic power due to blocking anything. However, her opponent's attack drained her magic power instantly, and she was no longer able to even maintain her abilities. She felt an extreme fatigue that she hadn't experienced in years. I must get my hands on this fallen witch, dead or alive, she thought vengefully. Chapter 4:16, Retreat. Nightingale followed the path she had scouted out before, passed through 3 roofs, and landed straight in the dungeon that the Marquis was held. Spear Passy heard the sound and stared up with wide eyes. "How did you get in?" Nightingale raised a finger to her lips as a sign for silence and limped out of the steel door. Judging from their clothing, the 2 guards in the pathway were probably followers of the church. She used the mist to instantly move behind the 2 men and slit their throats with a dagger. They would never have expected an attack from within the dungeon, so they didn't even turn their heads as they lay dying. After returning to the dungeon, Nightingale finally had a chance to examine her wound. The wind-resistant pants that Soraya made for her were cut open, and blood was gushing from a wound on her shin that was half an inch deep. Her enemy's magic whip must have scraped through the pants and cut through her flesh, but thankfully it had not damaged any bones. If not for the sturdy coating on her pants, she would have been injured even more seriously. "You're hurt," Spear said with a frown. "It's not too bad. We have to leave before you turn into a corpse." Nightingale did not tell the Marquis about the saint's plans of taking her to Hermes, for it seemed just as bad as dying, or even worse. "They had no idea that you were a witch before they captured you, so it must be the church's conspiracy to gain control of Fallen Dragon Ridge." "How about my brother?" "He's probably already become the church's puppet." "There's no time to waste, so I'll explain to you on the road." Nightingale tightly tied a sash right above the wound. "Where is the God's Locket of Retribution?" The Marquis pointed at her neck. "At first, they only tied my legs with a chain, but then they replaced it with this." Nightingale's heart immediately sunk upon seeing the metal ring as thick as her thumb. This kind of God's Locket of Retribution was made by stuffing magic stones into a metal tube and sealing it with a special technique, making it practically impossible for someone to undo it. "Do you remember where the locking device is?" "It's inside the dungeon near the entrance, where they brought me to be locked." It was obvious that after discovering the Marquis' real identity, the saint decided to use the strongest restrictions that could almost trap any witch except an extraordinary. She would have to remove this contraption in order to take Spear into her mist and escape. "Let's go to the first dungeon," Nightingale said decidedly. "Come with me." She fought against the stabbing pain in her shin, returned to the fallen guards, took their keys, and opened the cell door. Suddenly, the tolls of ringing bells broke the silence and echoed throughout the tower, which made her heart race. "That's the church's alarm," Spear said with a panicked expression. "I knew they would come eventually," Nightingale whispered. "Our only chance of surviving is to move faster than our enemy." The alarm might have actually helped her because all the men in the basement would swarm towards the only entrance at once, making it easy for her to eliminate them together. She descended on them with her mist and aimed her gun at these men. After her bullets pierced her first target, they immediately struck her second, splattering blood everywhere. The godstones of retaliation that they wore served as clear targets in her black and white vision, while her invisibility rendered the men clueless about where to attack. After 2 rounds of shooting, there was not a single living guard left in the dungeon. However, she knew that these were the lowest-rank followers and that an armed judgment army was headed their way soon. If she couldn't take off the godstone of retaliation before their arrival, it would be very difficult to escape. "Come here." She quickly spotted the locking device, a metal instrument resting against the wall with 2 rusty clamps stretching outwards, resembling a terrifying torture device. Spear pressed her neck against the clamps, and Nightingale fastened the device onto her and furiously turned its handle. With the help of the pulleys, the clamps pulled in opposite directions and created an opening in the god's locket of retribution. At the same time, the sound of the Judgment Army's armor rattled near the cell door. "That's them right there," someone yelled. "Take aim, shoot. Let's go." Nightingale brought Spear into the mist, but small black holes shot towards her and tore her mist apart. There were godstones of retaliation on the bolts. Nightingale felt a cold sweat break on her forehead as she and the Marquis became completely visible to the Judgment Warriors. It was clear to see that these men were trained very differently from regular followers. They shot their first round of bolts all throughout the passageway to close off their exit, and only half of the men participated in the first attack. Meanwhile, the other half waited for the witches to expose themselves. After spotting their target, the second wave of arrows flew towards them. Nightingale heard the buzzing of arrows behind her and pulled the Marquis in front of her body, yelling, "Duck!" A searing pain spread like fire through her back as she was hit by countless arrows, but she didn't stop running. As they rounded a corner, Nightingale tasted blood in her mouth, probably from biting her lip in pain before. "Are you okay?" I'm fine," the Marquis said blankly. Did you just block the bolts for me? If you were shot, you would be gone but I might make it." Nightingale reached behind her and found that none of the arrows had pierced through Soraya's windbreaker. Although her back hurt like it was on fire, there were only bruises, and no stone powder had entered her body. The Judgment Warriors hurried towards them. They probably did not expect the 2 witches to survive the second wave of bolts without a shield, so they were a considerable distance away. After escaping the binds of the godstone of retaliation, Nightingale grabbed Spear and entered her mist. She rushed upwards through the floorboards and soil to the outside of the tower, took a bamboo tube from her bag, and pulled the string on its end. A blinding red light shot out of the tube into the sky and exploded into a shower of sparks that looked like stars dotting the sky. When His Highness gave this to her, he kept boasting about how one flare would summon 1,000 troops to her aid. Right now, she didn't need 1,000 troops and only prayed that Maggie could see her signal. Soon, a giant shadow descended from the sky as Maggie landed next to the tower, her large body crushing its walls and her wings fanning away the fog around them. What is that?" Spear Passy stared in awe. "That's my friend." Nightingale had lightning fastened the Marquis onto Maggie, used the last of her strength to crawl onto her back, patted her body, and said, "Let's fly." "Ayo, ayo." Maggie roared at the incoming Judgment Warriors, flapped her wings, took off, and disappeared into the night with the 2 witches. Chapter 417, Strike Back. On the fallen dragon ridge, Lightning expertly set up a tent big enough for 4 beyond the wind's reach. Nightingale sat by the fire to warm herself. She rolled up the cuffs of her pants and found her calves stained with blood. The places hit by the saint were swollen. She had not felt it at the time with adrenaline coursing through her, but now, as she relaxed, she struggled to lift her legs. If Maggie had not come to her rescue, she probably would not have been able to run any further with carrying the Marquis. It was extremely dangerous to move in the mist in her current condition. The changing lines inside of it were staircases lined with sharp blades waiting to cut her to pieces if given the opportunity. "Let me help you, Coo." Maggie took first aid supplies from a big backpack. Besides cotton and a small bottle of rubbing alcohol, she found an herbal remedy prepared by Leaf, the medicinal mainstay of the Witch Cooperation Association. Try as she might, Nightingale could not stifle her gasp with accompanying grimace when the pungent alcohol was poured over her wounds. If His Highness hadn't mentioned that it could kill the bacteria that caused the demonic plague, she would think this was some type of torture. To Nightingale's great relief, the scorching burn was relieved quickly by the herbal preparation. As soon as her wounds were bandaged, she felt much more comfortable. "You're back," the Marquis said in a low voice. "Is it all right?" "What's about her back?" Lightning crawled into the tent with a bundle of firewood. "To save me, she was shot by their bolts," Spear said forlornly. "No big deal. It's like taking a couple of punches." Nightingale twitched her mouth. "It's not a problem as long as I don't sleep on my back tonight." "It's better to apply some herbal medicine on it," Lightning said while fiddling the branches in the fire pit with the sparks flying. "Leaf's medicine not only can stop the bleeding, but also is very effective for bruises." "Lay down on me, Coo." Maggie sat down and patted her lap. "Let me apply the medicine to your back, Coo." Seeing the serious look in the white-haired girl's eyes, Nightingale could not disobey and acquiesced without argument. "All right." She took off her clothes with her hands covering her chest and reclined in Maggie's lap. The Marquis let out a muffled gasp. She knew without looking that her smooth back was now mottled with darkening red bruises. But it just looked scary. Since witches have strong self-healing capacity, these wounds will heal after 2 or 3 days, she thought, shrugging it off the best she could. During this tender evaluation and treatment, Nightingale coughed twice and said, "Marquis, do you have any plans for the future? Your brother Redwine, deluded by the church, has betrayed you. Actually, before that military coup, neither he nor the church knew you're a witch." Then she briefly repeated what she had heard in the tower to the Marquis. "They worked in collusion to deprive you of your title. Even if you aren't a witch, you'll be put to death as a devil's minion. It'll be easy work for the church. If they dare to murder a Marquis," Spear said, gnashing her teeth, "I'll make Redwine and the church pay the price." "The church's deeds are far beyond your imagination." Nightingale shook her head. "They kill even kings without blinking. Think of the kingdom of Everwinter and the kingdom of Wolfheart." Spear was stunned for a moment and then opened her mouth to ask, "Does the church really dare to swallow all 4 kingdoms? I've only heard about it from merchants of neighboring countries, but most of the nobility in the King's City thought it ridiculous." The nobility in King's City also said Roland Wimbledon was a rebel king. Nightingale shrugged. "If His Highness guesses right, conquering the 4 kingdoms is only the first step in the church's plan, but unless you join the Witch Union, I can't tell you the conspiracy behind it. Besides, the church must spend some time plotting this military coup and most of your men should have already swung to Redwine who has promised them more profits. If you want to take back Fallen Dragon Ridge, you can turn to His Highness for help." "Will he really help me?" "Of course, it's our solemn duty to wipe out the church," Nightingale said with a trace of a smile touching her lips. Marquis was silent, and she looked like she was hesitating to say something. "Believe me," Nightingale said, recognizing the Marquis' hesitation. "You're free to leave the Western region anytime you want. His Highness never compels anyone to stay." "Is he really establishing a place where witches and ordinary human beings live together?" This was the second time she had asked Nightingale this question, and again Nightingale answered proudly, "Yes, His Highness' territory is a place like that. It's the witch's holy mountain. In the firelight, the expression seemed uncertain on Spear Passie's face. After quite a long while, she nodded slightly and asked, "Are we going to set off tomorrow?" "Not yet," Nightingale and Lightning spoke with one voice. Then they gazed into each other's eyes and burst into laughter. "The local church will try to report to Holy City what happened here, so in the following 2 days, we must catch all the pigeons sent out by our enemy," Nightingale explained to the Marquis. "After that, Maggie will carry you to Border Town. I have some other pressing demands here." She remembered what the saint had said in that room atop the tower. She would leave for Redwater City soon after the military coup. Apparently, wherever the saint went, an undercurrent of tension soon followed. Troubles big or small were sure to find His Highness. If she could impede the saint, she would not only sabotage Church's plan but also collect a bounty of information from the saint. Nightingale took a deep breath and made a plan to kill every member of that church platoon, but she was not sure whether Prince Roland would agree to her plan. If he insisted on her giving up the plan and going back, she would do as he wished. 3 days later Maggie, who had already sent the Marquis on to Border Town, returned to Fallen Dragon Ridge bearing 2 witches from the sleeping island on her back. "Why are you here?" Nightingale asked, the surprise evident on her face. "Prince Roland sent us to help you," Andrea said, gracefully hopping off the big bird's back, doffing her hood and giving her blonde hair a nice shake. "We'll get 2 pieces of ice cream bread in return." "Wiping out a church platoon, you can never do that without me," Ashes said with a smile. "His Highness said you can do what you've planned, but take safety into account first, Coo." Maggie changed back to a girl and continued, "He said he was waiting for you to return to the castle." "Really?" Nightingale mused, suddenly aware of warmth in her heart. "I get it. So how many are there?" Ashes raised her eyebrows slightly. "I heard there's a witch among them." "I don't know the exact number yet, but there are at most 20 judgment warriors along with their servants and some believers," she said in a measured voice. "You take care of the others and leave the witch to me." Chapter 418, Finish the Fighting. They had been on the ridge for a week when Lightning detected the platoon at the north gate of Fallen Dragon Ridge. As Nightingale had expected, the church's emissary delegation was composed of 25 fully armored judgment warriors, who were riding stallions at the head of the platoon. There was a transport corps of around 100 mercenary fighters and believers walking behind the judgment army. Among them, there were 2 coaches. She assumed the saint was in one of them. The 5 witches secretly followed the platoon, as it headed toward Redwater City. According to the plan, they would initiate the attack when the platoon was out of the monitoring area and thus would be unable to call for backup quickly. Nightingale quietly watched a coach in the platoon from her mist and vaguely saw a silver light of magic power coming out through the distorted silhouette of the carriage. If Nightingale acted alone, she could probably kill the saint of the church, but it was not guaranteed that she could kill all of the enemies here. But now, with the help of the witches from Sleeping Island, it was highly possible that they would be able to block the news in the Southern Territory. Once this platoon was eliminated, Hermes would not know anything, at least until next spring. And by then it would be very difficult for them to investigate what had happened to the emissary delegation. Nightingale did not like killing, but this time it was an intentional decision. It would lighten the burden on His Highness and help to defend the witch's holy mountain. She would not regret it. When the emissary delegation entered the forest, Nightingale saw a dark shadow coming close. It was Maggie. She folded her wings and swooped down, roaring. Horses suddenly neighed in fright and went off uncontrollably. All the people were shocked, dumbfounded, and only stared goggle-eyed at the scene. But the giant beast did not burst into the crowd to bite and stomp on them as they had expected. Instead, it spread its wings just over their heads and flew away close to the ground, leaving a storm behind it. The strong wind made it hard for them to open their eyes. Suddenly, a person jumped off the beast's back and landed on the ground. "Enemy attack," the judgment warriors shouted among the emissary delegation. Hearing this, the believers began to recover themselves, drew out their weapons and struck at the unknown enemy at the center of the platoon. Nightingale's vision filled with black and white lines. They were fully covered with lightless black holes which could protect them from ordinary witches, but not from Ashes the Extraordinary. She cut all the believers within her range in two, at their waists, like reaping wheat. All the people around her fell swiftly. She used an ordinary iron sword instead of her symbolic heavy sword, in order for Maggie to carry one more witch besides herself. The iron sword quickly cracked and broke during the fight. She seized the weapons dropped by the enemy, a halberd, a stick, sometimes an iron hammer or a cutlass. Anything in her hand became a lethal weapon. Blood splashed and bodies were torn apart. In the middle of the platoon, Ashes cut them in two all by herself. In the rear part of the platoon, the mercenary fighters could hardly offer the middle section any help because they had their own difficulties. Andrea kept skipping through the forest like a fairy. She used the branches and trunks of the trees to cover herself and shoot arrows every time she changed position. Every one of her arrows would hit someone between his eyebrows and every one of her shots was to kill. In less than 10 minutes, the whole platoon was a mess. Screams, cries and fighting noises resounded in the forest. Nightingale joined the fight immediately. She dashed through her mist, closely following her target, who was her only target in this fight, the saint of the church and the witch hunter. The coaches were drawn by the frightened horses. They ran wildly for a long way before the horses finally calmed down, but then they did not return to the platoon. Instead, they left the main road and burrowed into the forest in two different directions. It seemed that the saint had already noticed that among her enemies there was a tough opponent, an extraordinary. For most witches, an extraordinary with God's stone of retaliation was unbeatable. Unfortunately, she could not escape from Nightingale's control. Nightingale had already spotted her position earlier on. The one in the other coach was likely a high-ranking priestess or priest. Nightingale left it to Lightning and Maggie. Despite the fact that the saint's coach tossed heavily on the bumpy road in the forest, the coachman kept whipping the horses, looking like he was urged by someone to speed up. Nightingale approached. In order to shoot fatally every time, she only fired when she was less than 10 meters behind the target and in line with it. She aimed at the 4 Judgment warriors following the coach and pressed the trigger to kill them one by one. The Judgment army immediately split off at the sound of the gun, but the distance now was still only several steps for Nightingale in her mist. Further, their full armors were doing more harm than good in a fight against large-caliber bullets. The bullets became more harmful to the human body after going through these deformed, cracked armors. After getting rid of the 4 Judgment warriors, she pointed her gun at the horses. As the 2 horses fell down, the fragile wooden carriage promptly flew off from the force. It then hit a tree trunk and immediately fell apart. Through the flying pieces, a person wrapped in silver light rolled out. Nightingale aimed and shot without hesitation, but the light formed by magic power seemed to have consciousness and blocked the bullets one by one. She moved away to reload a new cartridge. "Traitor," the saint shouted angrily, charging towards where Nightingale hid. This time, the situation was different. They did not fight in a small room anymore. Now every step Nightingale took would cost the saint more than 10 steps to catch up, and the effective range of a revolver, which was around 50 meters, was much bigger than the area a witch could affect with her ability. The saint's silver whip could hardly reach Nightingale, while a bullet could put the saint to death any time. At this distance, merely 1 or 2 out of 5 shots could hit the target, but luckily Nightingale had enough time to reload new cartridges and keep aiming and firing. After 5 cartridges, the silver light dimmed out. One shot hit the saint's left shoulder and another went through her stomach. She could no longer stand. She staggered a few steps, and then fell to the ground. Nightingale was not in a hurry to approach her. She went back to the place where the carriage had fallen apart to pick up a God's stone of retaliation before she walked to the saint. During the fight, she had kept moving around the carriage so it would be easier to search the site afterwards. The moment Nightingale appeared beside the blood-covered witch, she suddenly stretched out her right hand, the only part she could move now, only to find that her silver light could not pierce her enemy as she wanted. "You damned demon, the gods will put you on trial," she said, gritting her teeth. Blood was spewing out of her mouth. Nightingale pointed the gun at her chest expressionlessly and replied, "Really? I'll wait for that day." Then she pressed down the trigger. Chapter 419, Faith. After the smoke caused by the battle dissipated, the forest returned to silence. The witch's long braids had unraveled, and her hair spread like white petals over her body. Blood streamed down her back and quickly formed a dark red puddle, slowly immersing into the ground and melting the cold, hard soil. After that, the air was filled with a smell of iron. Nightingale squatted and untied the blindfold on the witch's face. She found the face looked unexpectedly young, probably similar to her own age. However, the scars by her eyes destroyed her overall beauty. Her eyes looked like they had been repeatedly burned by red-hot iron, and her skin was red and wrinkled, so she had lost the contours of her eyes. This was undoubtedly caused by men. Nightingale gently touched the wrinkled scars. As for whether she suffered these wounds before becoming a witch or after serving the church, no one would ever know. However, this was no longer important because from now on, she couldn't hurt any more witches and wouldn't suffer any more torments. After searching the saint's body, Nightingale found a letter, a seal and an emblem in the pocket of her robe lining. The emblem was a circle split by a cross with a clenched fist in the center. She carried nothing else, no gold royals or jewelry. Perhaps she never enjoyed anything in her life, Nightingale couldn't help but think. "Hey, look at what I caught." Lightning's voice sounded from the air. She looked up and saw the little girl carrying a struggling man, whom she threw onto the ground. The man groaned in pain and rolled around, trying to get up, but he was hog-tied, so all he could do was to twist around helplessly. The man's outfit revealed that he was probably the priest who was sitting in the other carriage. "Where's Maggie?" "She's guiding Ashes to chase the runaway Judgment Army." Lightning walked over to the saint. "This is the witch trained by the church?" Nightingale said softly. "She won't ever hunt us again. From her appearance, it's difficult to believe that she saw us as enemies who must be killed." The little girl sighed. "If not for the church, none of this would have happened." Nightingale turned to glare at the captive man. When he saw the witch lying in a pool of blood, his eyes immediately widened, and he tried to say something but couldn't because of the cloth gag in his mouth. She took out the cloth. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" "Ahem, you've killed the pure witch of Bishop Tayfun, reckless devil. You'll sooner or later be hung by the church at the city gate and left to the crows." "Even if we didn't kill her, being caught by the church is no better," said Nightingale, "and compared with this, you'd better worry about yourself first. Even if I die, I'll have the salvation of God, and you guys will only sink into hell and be tortured forever." He yelled. "That's why I have to block his mouth," Lightning said. Nightingale stuffed the cloth back into his mouth. "Let His Highness deal with him. He said that the iron axe is very good at interrogating such kinds of people." By the time Maggie brought over the two witches from Sleeping Island, it was already afternoon. Ashes jumped down from the back of the beast and landed steadily next to Nightingale. "You're not hurt, are you?" "Everything went well," she said. "How about you?" "Obviously, not a single man escaped." Ashes laughed proudly. "Is she dead?" Andrea landed and looked at the saint. "I thought you'd keep her alive." The enemy was a witch, so hesitating would have been extremely dangerous. Ashes twitched her mouth and said, "If I were you, I wouldn't keep her alive either." "Gee, you have no mercy for your own kind." "She isn't our kin, but a puppet controlled by the church," the extraordinary said casually. "Besides, sometimes our own kind can be even crueler than others. I've never seen demonic beasts or demons imprison and torture people for several years." After saying that, she took off her blood-stained gloves and offered her hand to Nightingale. "Your actions and performance were amazing, and you did the right thing in this situation." The latter stared at her for a moment before holding her hand. "Thank you. Who would have thought that someone like her would comfort me?" Nightingale thought. "She probably didn't want me to feel guilty for killing a witch." "I think this victory is worth celebrating," Lightning said. Maggie agreed with a coo. Andrea rolled her eyes, reached out her hands, and placed them on top of the others. I have to clarify that if it were only your hand, I wouldn't touch it, so this for Nightingale's sake. Okay, I get it, Ashes said, raising her eyebrow. Then, the 5 witches raised their hands to the sky, looking like an unwavering tower in the cold wind. Next, they needed to collect the information carried by the emissary delegation and hide the traces of their battle. After properly dealing with these issues in the forest for 2 days, they arrived back in Border Town 3 days later. After landing in the castle backyard, Nightingale was immediately surrounded by her sisters. I heard you were hurt. Where is the wound? Nana asked. She has been waiting for you for a long time. Why did you come back so late? Lily asked, annoyed. Does it still hurt? Lucia asked urgently. This batch of herbs was made especially by me. They can't only stop bleeding, but also calm swelling, so their effect should be pretty great, Leaf said with a smile. How could you be so careless to scurry into the church alone? You might not be this lucky next time. This was Wendy's voice. It's all right as long as she can return safely. Scroll chimed in. Seeing their concerned faces warmed Nightingale's heart, and she didn't understand how the church's witches lived, but she knew what it was like to belong to the witch union. There was no doubt that this was worth devoting everything to. Then, she saw His Highness Roland. Lightning jumped into his arms and stuck to him like a gecko. Maggie also flew onto Roland's shoulder, rubbing his cheek. Although Nightingale wanted to do this too, she knew that she wasn't a child, so she held back the impulse to embrace Roland, walked up to him, and said with a smile, I'm back. I've waited for you for a long time. The prince smiled his familiar smile. Take a hot bath and get some rest. I put a few bags of honey-grilled dried fish in the office drawer. Okay, then I'll go help myself. Nightingale smiled. She reassured herself that she had done the right thing. Chapter 420, The Lord's Response. That night, Roland held a magnificent banquet at the Lord's castle. Since they not only rescued Spear Passy but also captured a priest from Hermes, it was technically the Witch Union's first unprovoked attack on the church. As the 5 witches who had participated in the battle walked onto the stage, the hall erupted into applause, and even Roland, who rarely drank, drained 2 glasses of Evelyn's chilled white liquor. Although it was only a small triumph, the months of the demons were long and stressful, and he wanted to take this opportunity to help everyone relax. When Roland stumbled into his office the next morning with a raging headache, Nightingale was already waiting for him, sitting cross-legged on his table. Don't you need more rest? He asked with a smile. Ever since he agreed to let her attack the emissary delegation, he had been worrying about her. Even if he knew she was in a spacious area and could use the mist to remain invincible, he still fretted about accidents. After all, this wasn't daily practice, but a true battle of life and death. Now seeing her energetic and vital, he felt much better. Nightingale swallowed her dried fish and said, Of course I don't. I'm in a great shape right now. As soon as Roland returned to his seat, she jumped off the table, walked to the back of the chair, and hugged him. One more day of rest is one more day without seeing you. The prince was slightly startled. I actually wanted to do this yesterday in the castle garden, but now isn't such a bad timing either, Nightingale whispered into his ear. She did not let him go and disappeared into the mist until she heard the footsteps outside the door. Your Highness. A guard shouted. The Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge, Marquis Passy, is here to see you. Send her in. Roland cleared his throat and adjusted his posture. Spear Passy walked into the office, bowed, and sat in front of his desk. I've thoroughly considered your proposal. What do you think? He poured a cup of tea for her. While Nightingale, Ashes, and others were battling against the church, he had also been busy with showing the Marquis around the town and negotiating with her. Roland briefly told her the crisis that the kingdom faced, the origins of the church, and the threats of the demons, as well as his future plans. When Spear heard about the church's origins and their reasons for hunting witches, she was so shocked that her eyes widened to the utmost. If not for the testimonies of Tilly and Agatha, she would have never believed that witches once had ruled the entire barbarian land, but her attitude changed greatly afterwards. Repealing feudal power, universalizing laws and administration institution, prohibiting the inheritance and sale of titles. I can accept these requests, but, she paused. I'm just curious. Do you really plan to spread this to all the territories? Yes. If we don't do this, Kingdom of Grey Castle will be nothing but loose sand, Roland said, nodding. Before our final enemies arrive, we must gather as much power as possible. Your plan will offend all of the nobilities, said Spear slowly, especially the part prohibiting the inheritance of titles. If I'm not mistaken, the lord of a territory is also a title. Doing so will confirm your reputation of the rebel king. That's why I don't expect them to back down voluntarily, he said, knocking on his desk. Before the fateful battle of divine will, the nobility's discontent is not my priority. I don't have to kill them all either. As long as these people accept my new terms, they may even be able to keep their territories, just not their feudal power. I believe they'll make the right decision. Centralization of authority was only effective when all the power was held by a few people, so if local authorities had too much power, they would threaten this centralization and even his position as a ruler. Unlike 1 year ago, the town now had the ability to undergo a revolution. After this step was completed, he would be the only ruler of Kingdom of Grey Castle in a real sense. You seem to have made up your mind. Spear sighed. If I don't accept them, your army will probably overturn my ruling anyways. I desperately need manpower for my plan, Roland said earnestly, especially someone with experience in governing a city. Like I said, you won't lose your territory, and you can proudly reveal your identity as a witch to your people without fear of the church. The Marquis was silent for a while. I also have a request. Please, go ahead. After you take back Fallen Dragon Ridge for me, I don't want anything to change, she said bluntly. I can only fully support you when Timothy is no longer the king. What a clever answer, Roland thought. She avoided giving a strict refusal and gave herself some room for changing her mind. Basically what she meant is that in order to earn her support, he needs to prove that his plan of unifying Kingdom of Grey Castle isn't just empty talk and that he's truly capable of doing it. It's a deal then. He didn't think much of the Marquis' secret calculations. If his attack in the spring went well, it might be easier to overturn Timothy than retrieving Fallen Dragon Ridge. Oh, by the way, Your Highness. Spear hesitated. The witches are attending class tonight, and I'm wondering if I could join them. Roland was a bit surprised. Those are all very basic beginner courses. You probably won't learn anything new. I'm intrigued by their calculating methods, she said, shaking her head. I've never seen anything like them before. Is she talking about the multiplication table or algebraic equations? He mused. Of course, as long as you're willing to join the Witch Union. After lunch, Iron Axe brought him some good news. He's willing to talk? Roland was slightly surprised. That soon? According to Nightingale, the captive priest was quite stubborn. Not everyone has a will of steel, Your Highness, answered Iron Axe seriously. The Sand Nation has some unique interrogation methods that barely damage the body but destroy the mind, even making some people view death as a relief. He has already lingered longer than most people. That's right, he thought. Professional spies not only have extraordinary willpower, but are also trained not to crack under any interrogation, but no one in this era has received this kind of training. Take me to see him, said Roland. I have quite a few questions for him.